closed session.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Emeryville City Council and the Mesa Board met in closed session on the items listed on the closed session agenda. Regarding item 5.1, an update was provided and direction was given. Regarding item 6.1, an update was provided, and on a motion by Councilmember Bowders with a second by Councilmember Pats on a 5-0 vote, the city authorized the city attorney to initiate litigation. Thank you. That's the conclusion of my report.
All right, I adjourn this meeting at 7:16 p.m. Cool, it is 7:16 p.m. I call to order the City of Emeryville as a successor agency to the Emeryville Redevelopment Agency. Let's call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders.
Here.
Councilmember Donahue.
Here.
Councilmember Martinez.
Here.
Vice Mayor Pats.
Here.
And Mayor Medina.
Here, can I get approval of the final agenda?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Vice Mayor Pats, second by Member Bowders.
Councilmember Bowders.
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue.
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats.
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. Any ex parte communications to report? Seeing none. Any public comment for the consent agenda or items not on this agenda? Okay, seeing none. Okay. Are you for this agenda or for the next one?
For the public comment.
Okay, cool. Go ahead and do him next.
This is redevelopment.
This is the redevelopment agency meeting.
Yeah.
Just for the council.
Okay, great. We'll get you next time. All right, we've got a consent item. Consent.
moved.
All right.
Second.
So we got a motion by Member Bowders and a second by Member Martinez.
Councilmember Bowders.
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue.
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats.
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. All right, I adjourn this meeting. It's 7:18 p.m. We're very close to being on schedule, and I call to order the regular city council meeting for the city of Emeryville. Let's go ahead. And we do not need to call the roll. I believe we're all still here. Can I get an approval of the final agenda?
I would like to move that we approve the final agenda, but with one caveat that we're going to adjourn the meeting in memory of Eleanor Lachu.
Second.
Got a motion by Vice Mayor Pats and a second by Member Bowders.
Councilmember Bowders.
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue.
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats.
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. Any special orders of the day? See none. Any announcements of commission or committee vacancies?
Good evening, Mayor and Vice Mayor and council members. Here are the following scheduled vacancies with the terms ending on June 30th, 2019. Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, 1 business representative and 3 community members. Budget Advisory Committee, 1 business representative and 1 city labor representative. Commission on Aging, 5 residents. Economic Development Advisory Committee, 1 resident and 2 small business representatives. Housing Committee, 6 community members. Park and Recreation Committee, 2 committee members. Planning Commission, 3 business representatives or residents. Public Art Committee, 1 business representative and 4 residents. Applications are due Monday, May 20th at 5 p.m. Appointments will be made at a special city council meeting on Tuesday, June 18th. For more information to apply for a committee vacancy, please visit the city's website at www.emeryville.org.
Thank you very much. Please apply by May 20th, as noted. Awesome. Council member special announcements or reports on meetings attended. Yes, Member Bowders.
I just want to thank the staff at ACTC and a couple of my colleagues up here in the public for coming out on April 24th to the San Pablo Avenue Corridor work group and study session. It's the first of several public meetings we will have about re-envisioning the corridor between Oakland City Hall and central western Contra Costa County. 22 miles of corridor through 9 cities has received funding through Regional Measure 3 to be redesigned for the purposes of enhancing transit options for residents, and that includes Emeryville. So we've begun that process and soliciting feedback on the design. The other thing is this past week, I traveled as a delegate for the county to Washington, D.C. on behalf of ACTC and had meetings with members of Congress, the White House, and the Federal Department of Transportation about federal transportation projects for our city, and I'm available to talk to anyone who wants to learn more about that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Member Donahue.
I went to a meeting of sorts. It was really a tour of various homes that would be considered sustainable in our future. It was put on by 350.org, and these homes were over the East Bay. And most of these homes had all electrification. They had no natural gas, and they showed how they were able to heat, cool, and reduce their energy costs at the same time. And it was fascinating. And they were able to save all of their water and have gardens, and it was very interesting.
Thank you. This Saturday, I attended a special meeting of the Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee where we did a walking tour of a lot of intersections and sites along the Powell-Christie corridor, starting at Shoreline Park, kind of looping around and making our way up to Public Market. I believe we had 17 stops on the way, and we discussed bike pedestrian friendliness, how the street felt. It was a fantastic event. I learned a lot about how community members interact with our sidewalks and intersections, which ones they despise, which ones they think we do a good job on, and we get a lot of feedback of ways we can improve, so it was super timely as we were considering the CIP tonight. Special shout out to John Sherman for putting it all together, walking it in advance, having a very rigorously planned out session for us. It was well handled. It was a great event. All right, any other reports? Seeing none, city manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to recognize the Community Services Department for an incredible community expo on April 20th. I think, Mr. Jimenez, we had close to 2,000 people, the biggest ever. And thanks to all the council members who helped out. And we had quite a good representation from our city staff with several tables. My favorite was the police department, where we had a line of kids lined up to sit and have their pictures taken on the motorcycle. So that was a fun day. And just also wanted to thank the council for adjourning in memory of Eleanor. For the community members who may not know, she was the founder of ECDC 40 years ago. In 1979. So she worked here through 2006. So it's a legacy for this community, and we just wanted to thank you for honoring her.
Thank you. All right. Any ex parte communications to report?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
On item 12.3, I've had meetings with about a half dozen small business and restaurant owners.
I've received several emails regarding items on 12.3 from small businesses and predominantly restaurant owners in town.
Same.
Okay. Public comment for consent agenda items or items not on the agenda. I've got a card here from Jake. Yes, coming up.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me without the mic?
You have to
You
use
talk
the
the
mic.
mic.
Talking to
for
the mic,
TV.
please.
You can turn it. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. So mine may be on the more conservative side of thing in regards to education and fourth of Emeryville. So one thing I've noticed throughout my time in the Bay Area is crime. Most people don't understand in other states, a lot of people own guns. But the problem is in California, we have people who are illegals with guns, or people who don't have the proper training on how to use one. My opinion and suggestion is to teach schools, and I know other areas have started doing this in the event of mass shootings, is educating students on how to use one, when to use one, and the consequences of using one, and if you use one incorrectly. Start young, teach, educate, move on. So starting in our schools so we have less crime, take them to a gun range or somewhere where they can get the education on it. For an example, you guys teach back when there was the whole craze of cigarettes. We taught about what the consequences of cigarettes were if they use them, what happens if we use them, and now look at the results. Less people using cigarettes because they know it's bad for them. People want to use guns, they can take it to a private range, but as a kid, you teach them the consequences, and hopefully it'll bring down our crime in a kid pulling out a gun and shooting someone or shooting themselves when they don't know how to use it, or the consequences or unintended consequences of their actions. Why not start teaching them how to use something that they don't know how to use, and teach them how, what it's for, whether it's for hunting or personal protection, but the liability and legality and other purposes in the state of California. So make them safe, educate. That's my take on it. The other thing is illegals in the state of California, but although I know you're rolling your eyes in some way, in the state of California, I know the city is a sanctuary city. However, think about the intended consequences of the people. For example, San Francisco, the lady who got shot by an illegal, by an officer, by a gun he stole from a park ranger. Now, you may be sighing, you may be thinking this is ludicrous, but part of the people who come to this country, while there are people who come to this country legally and commit no crimes, they live this world, they follow the proper channels, they don't want to have crime. The first thing people don't understand is they've already committed a crime, they came here illegally. Now, educate people on the use of personal protection honestly would, I think, be great in this city. Teach them how to do something correctly and not go about it the wrong way and land themselves up in jail. Thank you.
Any other public comment for the consent agenda or items not on this agenda?
Vote for Donald Trump, build a wall to keep out illegals, and let's have schools be gun training zones. Okay, but here in Emeryville, the following is true. The developer of the proposed 700-foot tall Ani apartment tower on Christie Avenue doesn't want to build family-friendly apartments in his tower. He says if he's forced to build family housing like other developers are required in town, his profits will be severely constrained. This is talk that gets Councilwoman Diane Martinez's attention. We must roll back family housing rules that Emeryville wrote in 2015 to help this developer, says Diane. She made that clear at the February 5th study session here in this chamber. She told us, when the council talks about rolling back the family-friendly unit mix rules, what they're really talking about is the Ani project. And then she said that the city attorney says she and her council colleagues are not allowed to discuss the Ani project with ordinary Emeryville citizens. She can discuss the project in back rooms with unspecified Ani employees, however, according to Ms. Martinez and the city attorney. Councilwoman Martinez says we must approve the Ani project because Emeryville, quote, really needs more housing. The premier housing authority in the Bay Area, the Association of Bay Area Governments, ABAG, of which Emeryville is a member, says Councilmember Martinez is wrong. Since 1999, ABAG says Emeryville has built more housing than what they recommend. If the councilwoman is prepared to tell us that ABAG is wrong, I want to hear it. Where do you get that information that Emeryville needs more housing? How much more housing do we need? And so can you please tell us, since you have that information, could you please tell us so that we can plan for it? And I'll remind you that the Brown Act does provide, you can provide short answers to citizens' questions here at the citizen public comment section. So how do you know Emeryville needs more housing? And then could you please tell us how much more we need so that we can plan for it?
Madam Mayor, are you done with your comments?
Yeah, I'm waiting for an answer, yeah.
Are you done with your comments after I speak? You're done with your 3 minutes?
Ceding your time.
No, not necessarily. It depends on what you say.
Please finish what you're saying, and then I will respond.
Okay. All right. So we're waiting for that. So we need more housing. Says Councilwoman Martinez. How much do we need? And we need to plan for that because the general plan uses ABAG and plans for 16,600 residents in Emeryville by 2029. So if you're saying that that's wrong, we need to adjust our general plan. We need to get rid of stop rent membership and ABAG, and please tell us how you know. Thank you.
Member Martinez?
So, Mr. City Attorney, please confirm the Brown Act allows for a brief response to public comment.
Yes, a brief response.
Okay. Mr. Donahue, I'm just going to say that some of your comments are untrue. This is not a dialogue. I'm done.
Thank you. All right, any other public comment for items on this agenda or not on the, consent or not on this agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion for consent?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion from Vice Mayor Pats. We've got a second from Member Donahue. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bouders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez? Vice Mayor Pats?
Aye.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. All right. Item 11.1, we've got a public hearing for the introduction and first reading of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Emeryville, amending the planning regulations to allow the research and development use type in the mixed use with residential zone. And I believe we have a staff report by Navarre.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I wanted to let you know that unfortunately, the applicant had a scheduling error and was not able to make it tonight. They send their regrets for that, and that I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Right.
So for background, this proposal is to allow the research and development, or R&D use type, and the MUR, otherwise known as mixed use, this residential zone, with a conditional use permit. All that requires for a zoning text amendment is to change the X you see on the screen and circled, change it to a C. So research and development is defined as research of industrial or scientific nature, including associated office space. Typical uses include indoor laboratories and testing facilities. This use type may include fabrication and small-scale facilities as part of the research function, but excludes manufacturing use types. And for the MUR zone, one or more variety of residential and non-residential uses, including but not limited to offices, retail, and hotel on larger sites. A mix of residential and non-residential uses is required. On smaller sites, a single use may be permitted. So here is our zoning map, and there's 5 zones that currently allow R&D either permitted outright or with conditional use permit. And this change would add the MUR zone, so kind of the salmon-y pink color there. So the reason for the proposal, the applicant has received many inquiries from R&D establishments, but they're unable to lease to them because they're in the MUR zone. The existing spaces that cater to R&D are generally for larger labs and are not what startups or smaller labs need, is what the applicant suggests, and that the applicant also suggests the proposal would help Emeryville attract and serve a greater variety of R&D uses. So for discussion, the R&D covers a diversity of uses. So requiring a CUP in the MUR provides an opportunity to assess potential impacts. Findings are required, and performance standards have to be met for this. So addressing air quality, light, glare, waste, noise, and odor and vibration. With these safeguards and discretionary review process, staff feels that it's appropriate to allow R&D in the MUR zone. For required findings, your determination needs to be that the proposed amendment is consistent with the general plan. And here are goals and policies that are consistent with the general plan. The proposed amendment is necessary for public health and safety and general welfare, or will provide a benefit to the public. So a conditional use permit is required to protect public health and safety and welfare, and it will be a benefit by adding to the diversity of economic and employment opportunities in the city. And finally, that the proposed amendment has been reviewed in compliance with the requirements of the California Environmental Quality Act, which has been, and it's consistent with the general plan EIR. So the Planning Commission reviewed this at their March 28th meeting, and the Commission inquired about potential impacts to neighboring uses. So staff explained the review process for R&D, which includes coordination with the building division and with fire department for safety, and I'm happy to discuss that with you tonight if you like. Staff also noted similarities of R&D and office uses. Oftentimes there's a very fine line between those uses, and oftentimes R&D uses are looking to go into places that are currently occupied by office. So there was no public comment at that meeting, and the Commission voted unanimously to recommend approval. So tonight, the recommendation of both the Planning Commission and staff is for City Council to adopt the first reading of the ordinance to allow research and development in the MUR zone with the conditional use permit.
Any clarifying questions? Yes, Member Martinez.
I was just hoping you could show us page 6 one more time of the slide and repeat that information so
Sure.
I can
Since it's
really
kind
absorb
of
it.
tiny there, let's talk that through. So currently, conditional use permit allows the R&D use in 3 of the zones in the OTDH zone, which is the striped area. Let's go try and get a little visual here for you. The INH, which is heavy industrial, the darker gray up here, and the OT zone, the offices technology, which is the kind of pinker zone, and mostly in the middle of the city. And it's permitted outright in the INL zone, which is mostly in the north, but a little bit in the middle, and the mixed use with non-residential zone, which is the purple. So this addition would be for MUR, which is largely actually in this area, in the Park Avenue district. There's some in the middle of the city as well, and in the north, this is where my cursor is right now, is the specific property that the applicant was inquiring about, and also the north side and west side of the city.
Okay, thank you.
Any other clarifying questions?
The noise ordinance would apply to this. Could you state what the noise ordinance would be?
In terms of the noise ordinance, the parts that I'm most familiar with actually do with construction, but the parts that we deal with in direct compliance for R&D are typically related to rooftop equipment and making sure that they are consistent with maximum decibel levels in the city. So those decibel levels, the rooftop equipment has to comply with it. This is one of the ways that we coordinate the applicant early on in the application with the building division before they even apply for a planning permit, to make sure that they're aware of the regulations and what needs to be met, and to make sure that that's feasible at the site that they're looking into. Does that help answer that question?
Well, do you have a specific decibel at a specific?
Yeah, it's by zone, so certain zones. So the only zone I have off the top of my head, because it comes up more often for me, is the RM zone, where this is not permitted. But it's typically, I believe, 65 maximum decibels at night for most zones. So it's a pretty low noise level. So in order to show compliance, they either need to submit cut sheets or information sheets for the products that they're installing, so like HVAC sort of equipment. And if that does not show compliance, then they need to have a sound report or a sound study done to show that it'll be compliant.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, let's open this public hearing then at 7:38. Any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close on this item.
I left my computer up here. Okay, every time we're asked to, a developer asks us to amend our general plan or get rid of regulations or laws that we have in Emeryville, it's always, to benefit them. And I've lived here for 37 years. I noticed that's what happens, is the rules get changed in order to assuage one specific developer. And so that sort of calls or brings into focus how weak our general plan is. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a group of residents come before the council and request something that happened that would require a general plan amendment, and have their wishes be assuaged. So it seems like we're at the beck and call in this room to developers and to businesses. And the town, we're the ones that vote. The businesses don't vote. And so we're the ones that matter, the residents. The businesses are here at our pleasure. They're only insofar that the California United States Constitution requires us to allow them to be here. Anything beyond that, they're here at our pleasure. It's disconcerting to me that we're constantly amending our rules and regulations and plans because a developer wants to maximize profits and can't do it with our existing rules and regulations. And I just think you should go back and look at why we came up with these rules to begin with, however many years ago, probably when we wrote the general plan. I guess that was in 2009. Why did we write this into the general plan to begin with? You should ask Charlie. Why was this written in there? And it was a great idea then, and now it's a terrible idea. You should get to the bottom of that. Why we wrote this law into the plan in 2009. Before you move ahead with changing it, you should find out why we did it in the first place. Thank you.
Any other public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I close this public hearing at 7:40 and open this up for discussion. Member Donahue.
I live next to a research facility that was built after I moved in, and The problem was they put the compressor, which is capable of being on 24 hours a day, right on our property line. It was so loud, but we had a contractual agreement with them to have them not have their equipment on our property line, but on the north side of the roof, away from us, and they just put it the long and the short of it is, they did sound adjustments to that equipment and made it livable for us. And in general, this research and development facility have been good neighbors. They're quieter than other residents overall. And so I think it's a compatible use, especially hearing that our sound mitigation requirements would be enforced. So I support this change.
Okay. Any other comments?
I'm satisfied that there are enough checks and balances within our review process to make this change.
Okay. Member Pats?
I'm ready to move the item.
Okay. Do we have a motion then?
So moved.
Second.
We got a motion from Member Pats. We got a second from Member Martinez. Yeah?
Could
Sorry,
I-
we're not moving it. Sorry, it's a first reading.
Right, so the council can make a motion to read by title only?
We just need a motion to read by title only?
Yes.
Second.
Got a motion to read by title only and a second. Otherwise, that'd be fun for Michael.
Councilmember Powders,
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue,
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats,
Aye.
and Mayor Medina.
Aye.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Emeryville amending the planning regulations to allow the research and development use type in the mixed use with residential zone.
Thank you.
And then the council can make a motion to adopt the first reading.
Now I'll move to adopt the first reading.
Second.
Got a motion by Vice Mayor Pats, a second by Member Martinez.
Councilmember Powders,
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue,
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats,
Aye.
and Mayor Medina.
Aye. Okay, passes. Thank you. Let's move on to 12.1, consideration of Transportation Committee recommendation for request for approval of a red zone across from 4045 Horton Street.
Good evening, Ms. Mayor, members of council. Andrew Clow, your Public Works Director. And I note on the agenda that the subject is actually consideration of a request for approval. It is not a recommendation from the Transportation Committee. The Transportation Committee did not make a recommendation. The request is for a red curb requested by the property owner across the street from 4045 Horton Street, for the purposes of allowing vehicles to turn, do their turning movements, and enter the loading dock in an easier and safer fashion. The item came to the Public Works Committee in November, and at that point it was discussed, a few options were looked at, and it was determined that the red curb was necessary to facilitate normal business in a safe and timely manner. Without the red curb, there'd be a need for more double parking, other blocking of traffic, and that the elimination of the one parking space would not create a hardship to the community, as there was enough parking, especially in the evenings. It came to the council on January 15th, and the council sent it back to the Public Works Transportation Committee for review, along with a series of additional questions that were to be addressed, some of which were not fully put into this report. One was, what about putting a yellow curb on the west side of the street instead, essentially to allow for some parallel parking and moving into the loading zone? It was determined that wouldn't be as efficient. The trucks would still have to maneuver into the parallel space. The loads would come off the back of the truck as opposed to into the loading dock. They'd have to be lifted and then moved across the sidewalk, blocking pedestrians, and it would take a longer period of time. And the trucks could still do their three-point turn and back into the loading dock, whether there was a yellow curb and whether they used it or not. Let's see, is there a conflict with turning movements with trucks and bikes? Yes, potentially there would be one, but we felt that this request would allow for easier turning movement and less time blocking the street for vehicles, bicycles, and pedestrians on the sidewalk. And if the property owner uses the red zone to access the property, can the city remove it later? Yes, they can. And if the owner transfers the property, will the purchaser retain a right to the red zone? No, the property owner does not have any property rights to the red zone. And when it went to the committee, the Transportation Committee on March 14th, it's now here at council. Staff did recommend that we felt it was appropriate and it would be a good use, but the Transportation Committee did not make a recommendation. It's just moved here to council, and I believe, yes, the property owner is present as well.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have any clarifying questions?
How big are the trucks that pull in there? Is it a full-size semi-truck?
I can answer some of these, but would you prefer to hear from the owner himself on that? I think that might be better. Come up, Mr. Heaney.
The answer is a 40-foot container.
Please use the microphone.
40-foot container will back up to the dock, and then the cabin from the container goes until we empty the container, then they come back and pick it up again.
Any other clarifying questions?
And how deep is it between the sidewalk and the loading dock?
Excuse me?
What is the depth from the sidewalk's edge in the image there to the loading dock?
We won't be on the street. We'll be right on at the entrance of our space, and maybe
Into the
a
street.
foot or two on outside of the warehouse itself.
Any other clarifying questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we'll take public comment on this item.
Thank you.
Okay. Did you want to give public comment on this item?
Excuse me, I'm not understanding.
Did you want to speak on this item as public comment?
No, I don't need to. The idea is that the warehouse has been obsolete for 7 years since we put the sidewalks on both sides of the building. Those sidewalks did not exist. So that we were easily coming and turning around into our warehouse. So for the last 7 years or 8 years, I've been trying to rent it, which is an impossibility. No trucks can come in and make that swing. So it's a loss of money, a loss of taxes for the city, and loss of rent for us also. So basically, we'd like you to consider to revive the building again, so it would be all functional.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment on this item?
It's more of a comment slash rhetorical question in a way.
Is it on this item?
Yes, it's particularly on this item. Are you, the people who are suggesting this, you guys have taken your driver's license test. Last time I checked, when I took my driver's license test years back, red curb means for fire, emergency vehicles. That's what they're there for. Not for your own personal space or to block. Ever consider no parking between such and such hours? Hey, I get that sometimes those hours may change, but overall, that may be more useful to for the space instead of a red line, where red line means emergency vehicles, meaning they could be in that space. The red line does not signify that you guys can block a space. The red line means it's for emergency vehicles only. So consider putting in a temporary, like those signs that say 2-hour parking between such and such hours. I mean, hey, that's not because I'm necessarily for the city or against it, but if people violate that, hey, they get money, the city gets money too on that. So I am against the red line because, as the California law says, it's for emergency vehicles only. Thank you.
Any other public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I'll open this up for discussion. Because we have discussed this extensively at Transportation Committee and did not come to a consensus, I will let Councilmember Batters kick us off.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Could you turn on my item, Sherry?
You'll be faster.
So I have just 6 image slides to share with my colleagues. So this is a perspective looking at the same garages from the opposite direction that was shown in the picture. And so orienting you, the request for the red curb is on the opposite side of the street to the left. My issue with this request is several things. I don't begrudge the owner and the manager of wanting to make the space useful, but this is located on a bicycle boulevard. And the number of incidents that we have, and as someone who's recently become a Ford Go Bike user at the intersection right across the street from this location, I can't help but recognize how dangerous this 2-block area is to bicyclists who move through this area. And there are a lot of different things going on. Could you scroll to the next couple images? So this is just providing a different view of looking down the street. And this is the view down the street. And then if you go ahead to the next one. This is the view looking up the street. And then please go to the next one. And so this is the view looking across at the building, and the truck that has the black side on it is obscuring the view of the garage. The garage is just behind that vehicle. But there's an entire space along this side of the street where loading and unloading could happen. And the reality is that the argument is that if the truck has to park in a yellow curb zone next to its building, that people will be moving stuff across the sidewalk and there'll be a slightly longer distance for people to move things. But the reality is, and the argument is that it's going to block pedestrians, but the truck is going to stick out over the sidewalk into the street if it's loading in the loading dock. And I want to show you, go ahead to the next image, what that looks like on Horton Street. So this is a block north at an area in the street where there is no sidewalk built out the same way on the left side of the image here, the west side of the street. This is Horton Street, a block north. Granted, this truck is bigger than the trucks that would come to this building. But I stood at Horton Street about a month ago when I took this photo, and I watched this truck attempt to navigate for 6 minutes to back into this garage. And so I think that the question I have is this, is if we want to help the owner make use of the building, I think we should be considering either providing a yellow curb space for deliveries only that's available to the owner alongside the building, or we should remove parking on the entire block on both sides of the streets to make space more free and less congested for bicyclists, because to me the uses here are in conflict, and unlike a large truck, a pedestrian or a bicyclist is much more vulnerable, and we've dedicated this in our general plan to being a thoroughfare for bicyclists and walkers. And I just don't believe at this point that that the allowances we're making are protecting pedestrians and bicyclists. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Who else would like to comment on this? All right, I'll give my perspective. We talked about this a lot at Transportation Committee. We went from transportation to here and back again. And I understand and respect Councilmember Batter's viewpoint, and I think we obviously share the same goals of trying to make our city safer and better for bicyclists, pedestrians, people using multimodal transportation. I see it from a different angle. You know, having that giant truck completely blocking the street creates a hazard where you have cars on the other side who are frustrated, who are waiting to zoom around and get through, and they cannot see what's on the other side. And if what's on the other side is a bike, we've created a dangerous situation. Given that these are going to be shorter trucks who'd be better able to navigate if they had a red curb and spend less time completely blocking the street, I think putting in the red curb would be a safety enhancement for bikes, because you wouldn't have that complete obstructed blockade where you cannot see past it, which I think does create a dangerous condition. We just talked about zoning. This is a mixed-use residential zone. Emeryville has a ton of warehouses, a lot of industrial use. It's part of our history and it's part of our present. And I think we know that. And making these uses work together is something that we have to figure out. And I do think that by making it less likely that we're going to have a truck completely obstructing the roadway, we can kind of bring an efficiency to that will reduce obstructed viewpoints, which in my mind as a cyclist are one of the most dangerous things we can have on the road. So, you know, we discussed the yellow zone briefly. I believe, and I'm trying to recall because I didn't take too many notes on that there were several problems with using the yellow zone besides just blocking the sidewalk for a while. So I'd like to, can you refresh me maybe on what the concerns were raised with the yellow zone?
The yellow, well, there were two. There was, well, let me see, two different parts. Well, I'm confusing for a second, not the yellow zone, but we also talked about limited time parking at the place across the street where the red curb, and that was determined to be potentially a problem too, because there would have to be more enforcement, because someone could park there and then they'd have to be moved out.
Yeah.
But the yellow curb you're referring to would be parallel, and I think what Mr. Bowder's talking about, close to the loading dock, and it might be a couple of spaces so the truck could come in, park parallel to the curb, and be right there adjacent to the entrance to the loading dock. The difference would be is that the truck now, they're taking the materials out of the truck from truck height with the forklift and then moving the forklift back and forth across the sidewalk and into the building, as opposed to if they went into the building, the truck would back up to the loading dock right at loading dock height. It would be a faster move off and there wouldn't be the movement of the forklift back and forth across the sidewalk. The other part then would be eliminated, as Mr. Bowers pointed out, is you wouldn't be doing the three-point turn in the middle of the street, which is what the red curb would allow. So you would avoid that, but you would have a longer period of time. And if they did want to back into the loading dock with or without a red curb, with or without a yellow curb, they're still going to be allowed to do that. So we couldn't stop them from doing that by placing yellow curb and saying, now you must use that. You may not back into the loading dock. So we couldn't stop that anyway.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Curious to hear from my colleagues who haven't been going around this.
Did we get an answer to the question of how far the trucks would be sticking out into the street with the size of truck that is, would be planned to use at this facility?
I can ask here what the distance is. The 40-foot truck, I don't know what the actual distance is from the edge of the loading dock to the curb. Some of the smaller box trucks, which are primarily what would be coming and delivering the carpet, would be almost entirely inside the warehouse, but perhaps protruding out. There may be some that would stick out across the sidewalk and block it, as Mr. Bowder said as well. So that would happen either way.
But we don't know.
Well,
The owner just said 1 foot.
He said 1 foot into the street.
1 foot into the street.
Not into the street, 1 foot beyond the face of the building is what he said.
When they drop the container, the cabin of the container is in front, so there'd be maybe 7 or 8 feet on the walkway.
On the sidewalk.
On the sidewalk.
The side.
7 feet from the front of your building.
Yes.
And the sidewalk is 6 feet wide. So that's
So-
1 foot into the street.
So what happens is when they drop the container, they move, so again, the container is going on the sidewalk maybe by foot or two, and until we empty it, and then we call the truck again, and they pick up the container and they go.
I understand. I think my concern is a couple things. One is to the point that was just made about enforcement. If you walk this block any day, and I walk the town with my dog in this neighborhood all the time, there are, on that block alone, there are a multitude of people who illegally park on driveways and completely block the sidewalks. They pull their truck in as if it's a parking space, and they've completely blocked the sidewalk. So pedestrians have to walk in the street on this block already. So the argument that a forklift will have to go back and forth over the sidewalk is not a primary concern for me. Putting people into the street is a primary concern for me. I also see in the Park Avenue district other places where forklifts do this movement already and move things. If you go to the buildings just up the street, they do this on a regular basis. And they do it over at Horton Street where Jared's Pottery is, and next door to that.
And 67
And
as
60,
well.
yes. So I see this regularly, and a forklift operator is smaller, has greater visibility and eye contact with pedestrians. I totally appreciate your interest as a building owner in trying to make your space marketable. And my suggestion is that dedicated space for you, curbside, is a good goal, but I have a problem with all the cross perpendicular movement in a space that has got a lot of other uses that is very dangerous for pedestrians, and we have had bicycle accidents in this block before. That's the concern I'm trying to address.
How do you suggest having a container parallel with the curb?
That's what I'm proposing, is to give you a whole yellow curb, 40 feet long, right up to your driveway.
Yellow curb, I cannot police it. Somebody comes in.
Well, but nobody can police the red curb, and so if somebody chooses to illegally park in the red curb, then your truck is going to try to make those with a 10-point turn.
With respect, it's less of a problem having somebody on the red curb, that you have to enforce it, than on yellow curb. Yellow curb can be a truck, can be this, can be that. With a red zone, is either a truck or a vehicle cannot park in the red zone. And this way, less problem for the city, and we don't have to police it. For every time we have a container, we have to come for somebody to tow with a car.
I appreciate your point of view on that.
Member Donahue.
So I want to understand more clearly. When the container would be unloaded, would the sidewalk be blocked for pedestrians?
For the time they're packing back.
Yeah, for the time that the container is being unloaded, would the sidewalk be blocked?
It'd be blocked while the cabin of the container is still there.
Yes, Scott.
Until they detach the cabin from the container.
Yes. Okay.
So is the container,
Can you use the microphone?
I think I tried to clear. Is the truck, the cab delivering a container, dropping the container, and then the cab of the truck moving away?
That's right.
So when the cab is with the container, it extends 1 foot out into the street?
Yes.
But when the cab of the truck moves away, the container
basically you'll have a
extends.
container like this, instead of like that.
Right. And when it's just the container, how far does the container extend out onto the sidewalk?
2 or 3 feet.
2 or 3 feet onto the sidewalk. So, okay, I think that, is that the question you were trying to
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Member Donahue?
Well, I'm more concerned now. I didn't realize the blockage that's occurring.
Okay. Vice Mayor Pats?
I don't have, I'm looking at the images and I'm looking at the street, and it's a warehouse space. There's roll-up doors on both sides. We already have a red zone further up the block for a fire hydrant. Trucks are coming, they're dropping stuff off, whether it's a forklift on the sidewalk, whether it's, it's a driveway. To me, the red curb makes sense.
Okay. Can I clarify, because you mentioned that there had been collisions on the street. I believe the collisions had happened at the intersection.
Yeah, 40th and Horton.
Okay, but they were not along
mid-block.
this block. No, on the intersection at 40th Street.
Yes.
Okay, so not caused by any warehouse.
No, but my whole point is people are always racing down Horton Street to catch that light from my neighborhood. And so if a truck is making all these moves, to your point earlier about people get backed up, then they're going to race down that thing, and I can see someone going through a red light and hitting a bicyclist on our bike lane on 40th Street. Or people pulling a bike out from the bike share station that we have on that block between the intersection and this garage. So I'm not foreboding or forecasting bad things. I'm just saying that we have a complicated matter on this block because we have, in our general plan, this is supposed to be the route for bicyclists. I understand there's an existing warehouse with a garage that the owner wants to make use of, and I think that just because the building has existed there for 70 or 80 years with a garage there doesn't necessitate us accommodating the truck in a way that makes secondary all the other uses on the street. I think there are ways to make it compatible, which is why I proposed the yellow curb. Staff disagrees. I didn't appreciate the staff report, to be honest with you, because it did not raise any of my answers to my questions. I appreciate you addressing them tonight, but I thought the staff report was grossly inadequate and not done well. So that's where I sit on this item.
Okay. Member Martinez?
I'm not in a place where I'm comfortable with a red curb at this moment.
Okay. So do we have a motion for either treatment that we've discussed tonight?
I'll ask the building owner if they're interested in a 40-foot yellow curb next to their building. If so, I'll make such a motion. If not, I'll move to deny. Do you have an interest in the yellow curb or no?
I'm sorry, this problem has been going on for 7 years now, 9 years.
Can you use the microphone, please? I'm sorry.
We lost a lot of rental for 8 years for the city to make a decision on a red or not. Either we have it, or what do I do with the building? It's obsolete.
Say that again. I didn't understand the last
What
item.
do I do if I cannot use my building? What do I do? What do I have to worry about a bicycle when I have a business to run?
Well, I also remember that when I was in the planning commission, you brought a proposal to renovate your building and you abandoned it. So I don't know what you're doing as a business owner, and that's not my prerogative.
Yeah.
But as the member of the city council, my business is to protect residents, including bicyclists and pedestrians. And so
That is
that's why
fair.
I'm raising this issue. So I appreciate, as I've said twice, your interest as a business owner, and I'm trying to identify a way to make both those interests work. I disagree with the request for a red curb. If 3 of my council colleagues want to support a red curb tonight, that will happen. It's not one person's decision. I don't hear 3 people saying that right now, so I'm offering to you, would you be interested in a yellow curb?
A yellow curb means we have to
You'd have a dedicated space for drop-off and delivery right in front of your building.
Who is going to police the yellow zone when
It would be the
somebody?
same as a red curb, where if someone's there when you have a truck delivery, you'd call the police department to remove them if they're not loading or unloading.
With a red zone, it goes for granted that the people are not going to do it. For yellow zone, somebody will, let's say, wants to park for 5 minutes, hoping that the policeman doesn't come or tag them. Then they stay there for an hour. The truck is coming, the container, what do I do with all those places who are already parked in a yellow zone? Unless you permit me to put a container next to the, and block half of the street.
No. It's this is the same enforcement issue everybody has in this city, and there are red curbs that are not
With
that are
respect,
violated all the time.
This warehouse existed before all of this happened. Now, you tell me how to do it. You have a 60,000 square feet was empty for 7 years because you're deciding that a bicycle is going to walk through this stuff. Why should I accommodate a bicycle when I cannot accommodate a business?
I think here's the thing, the people of Emeryville approved a general plan that made that decision. This is not an individual person's
No, that is
decision.
an individual for now.
I'm not making that decision. I'm looking at the plan that the city has in place, and I'm trying to accommodate this.
Let me get this back on track. Member Batters was asking you simply if you would be interested in having a yellow curb if a red curb was not an option.
When you say yellow curb, that means you're giving me 60 feet of yellow curb?
40-foot yellow curb
Parallel
next to your
to
business.
the building on your side of the street.
But this is more problem because now you have to take a forklift to go and unload and go back.
Yes, the question is, if you cannot get a red curb, are you interested in a yellow curb, yes or no?
I prefer a red zone.
But if you cannot have that yellow curb, useful to you or not?
Because the problem is not that. The problem is
He's saying
emptying a
no.
container.
No, that's a no. Okay,
That's a
thank
no.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, since I supported the red curb, I'll make a motion. I don't think I have a second, but I'll go ahead and move approval.
Nope, okay.
All right, we're done.
Make a motion to deny.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bouders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
No.
And Mayor Medina.
Aye. All right, thank you. Next up, action item 12.2, discussion regarding the city's 5-year capital improvement program for 2019 through 2024.
Okay, good evening again, Ms. Mayor and member of council. Are we ready to go?
Yep.
Okay. Good evening. We're here to talk about the City of Emeryville's capital improvement program, the new 5-year plan, proposed 5-year plan for fiscal years 2019-2020 through 2023-24. The current CIP was adopted in June of 2016, the 5-year CIP, and in fiscal year 2017-2019, during budget adoption, there were some updates and some changes made to the plan at that time. The existing plan, the 5-year plan, was predicated on a series of capital improvement program goals. The current plan builds off of this existing plan, adds some projects, modifies some, but continues much of what was already in the existing plan. At that time, some of the goals were to create infrastructure supporting a livable city, provide a high quality of living, direct resources to the high priority projects, update some financial policies, and create a CIP reserve. City Council this year, in April, also passed their council goals and specifically referred to as project priorities. This is not the entire list, but what I pulled out were the project priorities from the City Council goals and priorities, specifically identifying the South Bayfront Bridge and Horton Landing Park, active transportation safety and connectivity, the Art Center, the railroad crossing safety measures, and parking management plan implementation. As we went forward from the existing plan and building the new plan, there were a series of priority levels. We narrowed those down to 4 in making the first cut and identifying if the project was either part of a mandated program required for preventative maintenance, a safety improvement, or was a discretionary project. And a large percentage of the projects in the capital plan are in the categories of the first three. They're either mandated, preventive maintenance, or safety improvement. And that's a big part of what the capital plan is about, is maintaining that existing infrastructure so that it is here in a usable, safe manner going forward. And then the discretionary projects, there's quite a few of those as well, but then to determine which ones of these especially should we move forward with. We then also layered on implementation schedule criteria. And what I mean by this is identifying projects. It's an ambitious plan, it has a lot of projects in there. We certainly can't get to all of them. And so how do we get to the ones that are, which are the priorities, how do we address them, and with the resources that we have, and how do we maximize the resources that we have? First, was it consistent with the general plan, which is a yes or no and is a requirement? And it did go to the Planning Commission, which we'll mention in a moment. And the commission did find the projects in the CIP to be consistent with the general plan. The second question was, is it continuation of an existing project? There's an awful lot of projects which we're already underway on, either have completed design and are ready to bid or award a contract, have awarded a contract, or initiating the design process. Is it funded by a grant that may expire soon? We have a number of projects that are funded by outside grants, and we don't want to be in jeopardy of losing that funding, so we'll prioritize those. Does the project help to meet the city's climate action goals, and is it consistent with the city goals and project priorities, which I just had up earlier? We went to a number of the advisory boards at the Public Works and Transportation Committee. A couple of the key takeaways were to coordinate with the council goals and priorities and stay consistent with those. Specifically, there was quite an emphasis on the connectivity. Complete projects, they're already underway, and again, make sure that we have ensure timely grant fund expenditures. Not surprisingly, at the Parks and Rec Committee, they wanted parks, specifically calling out Davenport Park improvements, additional marina improvements, Temescal Creek Park improvements, which is primarily some improvements, additional improvements to the dog park as well as a bathroom. Point Emery Shoreline Protection, that's a project that is underway. Doyle Street, this was a new one. It wasn't in the plan, and this is the section 61st, between 61st and 62nd at Doyle Hollis Park. And the suggestion is to limit that to only bicycle and pedestrian and eliminate the vehicular traffic coming through there. We've taken a preliminary look at that and think that that's feasible. That's a doable idea. And so as part of our annual paving rehab, we're taking a look at the possibility of putting that in there as a pilot project, essentially paint and temporary bollards, and see how that goes. And at some point, if it does work out well, that then we could seek some funding and some sources and perhaps build a better connection between the tot lot that's on the one side and the rest of the park that's on the other. We'd have to make sure that, you know, a zooming bicycle is also dangerous to a child crossing, so we'd have to work on that. As I mentioned, at the Planning Commission, we went there on April 25th, and they found the CIP, proposed CIP, to be consistent with the general plan. I know I apologize if this is a dense slide, but I just going to run through it very quickly. I want to highlight a number of the achievements and existing projects that are currently underway. These are projects that have been completed, design and construction, the 2018 annual street rehabilitation, which included quite a number of bike safety improvements. And this is one of the ways that we're trying to address a lot of the connectivity issues, is in that paving program. We put a lot of paint down, which improved in many areas, bollards, paint, a lot of things that we could do to increase and improve the flow, especially enhancing bicycle safety. We installed a Class 4 bikeway on Horton Street. We completed the Emeryville Greenway from Powell to Stanford, otherwise known as Pelledew Park. The street light retrofit project, traffic signal video detection expansion. We closed 2 additional underground storage tank sites. We only have 1 remaining. We improved the lighting at Temescal Creek Park. We partially replaced carpet in Civic Center, repaired the sprinklers. Citywide, we replaced and upgraded the trash receptacles, replaced a series of street trees on Doyle Street, and did the Temescal Bridge seal coat. These are projects that are completed design and or have already awarded the contracts. That's for the Bayfront Bridge, the Horton Landing Park, traffic signals at Doyle Powell and Harlan and 40th, the Powell Overcrossing, joint seal, and methacrylate coating. This is a perfect example of one of the common projects in the CIP that we don't have other than Mike Roberts, our senior engineer, anyone getting excited about methacrylate coating and preserving those bridges, and yet they're incredibly important to all of us that we use all the time. But Mike loves his methacrylate coating, and it's important, and that's a big part of what the plan does, and I recognize that, and that's I'm saying it's a big part of the effort that goes into producing it, and then we have these other projects that we all like Point Emery Shoreline Protection. That's also Mike's project. Greenway crossings, safety enhancements, that's up at along the Greenway. I think you're all familiar with that, but the rapid flashing beacons, the raised crosswalks, that'll be underway, hopefully construction this summer. And then the 40th Street, San Pablo Avenue median rehabilitation. We're starting work on the design of the annual rehab, sidewalk improvements, the railroad quiet zones, San Pablo Avenue mid-block crossing, a major renovation, roof replacement, et cetera, and some other tenant improvements at the Child Development Center. The Civic Center, heating, ventilation, air conditioning upgrades, bay-friendly landscaping, bike share stations, a large trash separator in the storm drain line, probably somewhere on San Pablo. The Powell Corridor Traffic Safety Study, and the innovative deployments to enhance arterials, which is essentially the automated traffic signals. So that was quick. The new CIP follows the same categories that the last one did, and all of the projects, these are just groupings, they're not prioritizations, but how the plan is laid out. And on the edge of the dais there, this is included in the draft CIP in your report, but in case you wanted to look at a printed copy instead of an electronic version, it's just starting at page 1, it's the project summary. So it lists all the projects that are in the plan, and they're in these various categories. So the proposed new projects that are in the plan, I'll slow down a little bit here. These are the projects, the first, and they go in order as they are on that table and in the plan. A climate action plan implementation. This is a modest amount of money, $25,000 a year, and what we're looking at there is when there are opportunities, if there's a grant opportunity that needs some matching funds, if we have a project that perhaps if we had a few dollars and could put into it that would help the climate action plan goals, that we have some funding available to do that. The second is the police administration building feasibility study. We're looking in year 2 or so to take a look at the operations, the capacity of that building, some site surveys and studies to see if there is a good place to potentially relocate the police administration building. Is it meeting its current needs? But that, again, would just be a feasibility study at this phase. The city facilities sewer laterals, we need to replace or pressure test and prove they're all tight. As part of our consent decree, we have a number of them left. These are our own city facilities, like here, or the fire station, or police station. Adeline Sites is a housing site, and if you want any more details on that, Chad is right here. I'm more than happy to talk to you. The Greenway and Mandela Connector Feasibility Study. This is one that it shows in the general plan, and that's the trying to connect, as it says, from the Greenway and coming down around the 40th Street and connecting to the Greenway and down Mandela. Green infrastructure projects is similar to the climate action plan. It places a little bit of money. It's $50,000 in 2 different years. And that's when opportunity knocks. If we have a project and the project can't afford it, but if we added a little bit of funding to it and there's an opportunity to improve and put some green infrastructure in as part of that project, that's what that would be used for as well. Streetlight survey and standards development. What we want to do is take a look. We've gotten some requests recently for new streetlights, some other areas where it's too dark. In some cases, the streetlights have been put in by the developer as part of their development, and they're not actually city streetlights. In other cases, they have been put in. There are some blank spots around the city, and we don't currently have a lighting standard for the city, what we should have in a commercial zone or residential zone. So we want to do a citywide survey of the existing conditions, set some standards, and then there's a little bit of funding in that project to be able to install some streetlights after we've gone through a standards process, rather than just responding, you know, one-offs when people come and say, hey, I want a streetlight, it's dark here now. Innovative developments to enhance arterials, I mentioned that earlier. That's a grant that we had got, and that's a transit priority, also recognition of bicycles as they approach the intersections, and basically modernizing the traffic signals and being able to have them talk to each other. Another project, phase 2 of the traffic signal modernization, is exactly what it says. We're back to the structure, deck, seal, repair, and maintenance. This is for our bridges within the city, Temescal Creek, 40th Street, Powell Overcrossing, just consolidating them all into one project, and we have to do this about every 5 years. We should be doing some work on the bridges. The 40th Street San Pablo Transit Hub and 40th Street reconstruction, you guys have seen that one many times. That's the cycle track and the transit along 40th Street. And then the last one is another study. This would be potentially extending that bike lane or cycle track and transit from the intersection at 40th Street and Adeline all the way to the MacArthur BART station. This, much like the Greenway connection, Mandela Greenway connection, would require a lot of coordination with the City of Oakland, but they're both in here as proposed new projects at this point for a study. A few of the projects have been modified. The Temescal Creek Park improvements, we're taking a look at that one. We're going to have to work with the community. There's been interest in having a bathroom installed there. There are some problems with that, but some technical difficulties with it. Also, we need to work with police on where good locations to site it. The part that mainly is modified from that is the connection, connecting the park and adding the connection to the local streets has pretty much gone away. There's not much interest in doing that, but we want to redirect some of that funding to be able to build the bathroom if that's what the community desires. Davenport Mini Park, this has been in front of you before, and this was to build a tot lot to expand rather than just do a little rehabilitation work, but to build the tot lot. Pedro brought that report forward to you. Marina Park improvements, we added a few things in there. We definitely want to work on the picnic tables and barbecue pits. We're currently getting ready to do some significant work inside the bathrooms at the marina. New epoxying the floor and ripping out some of the urinals and replacing, et cetera. It takes quite a beating out there, so we're going to fix that up. And then also take a look longer term at the possibility of a dog park or another tot lot or some other kind of park out in the marina area. I mentioned the annual street rehabilitation program here is a modified project. Just to highlight that the fact that we may go forward with that pilot project we talked about on Doyle Street, and that would be part of this project itself. And then the parking management plan, whichever version of it we end up having exactly, that's also a modified project from the original paid North Hollis parking. And then specifically, I have a slide here on the South Bayfront Bridge and Horton Landing Park, because this one, the scope, I can go over that a little bit. I think we all know what it is. It's the pedestrian bicycle bridge crossing over the railroad tracks, connecting over to the connector on Bay Street. The status of that project is we've completed the plans and specs, we bid the project, we received the bids, and that slides us into the budget part of it, is that it's expensive. And the bids came back at $21 million. The original construction, what was budgeted and was in the CIP, was about $15.1 million. Came in about 21, and so right there you can see the delta. And the fact that it's also been a project that was restarted in 2016, so there was some redesign work that needed to happen. We had to acquire property from the Union Pacific Railroad. We had to negotiate the easements. We had to pay for the easements. We had to pay for the flaggers. So there's also some additional costs that came into that. So the bottom line is that it's about $9 million that we would be looking for to be able to complete this project. And if that's something that the council is interested in continuing to move forward with, then we'll be back here on May 21st with a staff report requesting authorization to award the contract, as well as pay the Union Pacific Railroad for their services, and a couple of other minor things. But I'm going to turn it over now to Susan, who will talk in more detail about the budget, and specifically she can also address where is the money coming from for that bridge.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I will present the funding source that are used to support the city's capital improvement program. Besides residual tax increment revenues and commercial transfer tax, the city used a variety of other funding sources to support the CIP program, including general fund contributions, funds from the former redevelopment agency, impact fees and developer contributions, assessment district bond funds, grants, Measure B and BB funds, sewer connection fees and capital allocations, marina funds, the new SB1 funds, gas tax, housing successor funds, and the potential housing bond funds. The CIP proposed a capital investment of $100 million through 84 projects over the next 5 years. 12 of those projects are new projects. The $14 million for fiscal year 2020 and the $19 million for fiscal year 2021 represent proposed budget. The $24 million, $15 million, and $26 million for the next 3 years are for planning purpose, and the amounts will be updated in the next budget cycle. This slide presents the funding allocations to 11 project categories. 11% for capital facilities, 2% for facilities maintenance, less than 1% for marina projects, 37% for housing projects, 1% for information technology projects, 3% for pedestrian and bicycle projects, less than 1% for public art projects, 2% for sewer projects, 15% for streetscape projects, 26% for transportation, and 3% for vehicle replacement. The CIP reflects an update to the residual tax increment policy. Tax increment revenues are currently allocated to the Capital Project Fund, the General Fund, the Housing Fund, and the Economic Development Fund. 50% goes into the Capital Project Funds. The proposal is to reduce surplus tax increment allocation to capital projects from 50% to 47.5% in fiscal year 2020 and to 22.5% effective fiscal year 2021. 2.5% allocation is to support public art programs. 25% allocation is to support general fund operations. The reallocation from the Capital Project Fund to the other two funds is estimated at $6.8 million over a 5-year period. This proposal was presented to the Budget and Governance Committee last week. As Andrew mentioned earlier, the construction cost for the South Bayfront Bridge is higher than our prior estimate by about $9 million. The CIP proposed to use the $7.5 million capital reserve to bridge the gap, including $5 million in infrastructure reserve and $2.5 million in implementation reserve. The remainder of the gap is it's proposed to come from the fund balance in the capital project funds. This proposed changes will not impact the 2019-24 CIP due to higher than expected commercial transfer tax in the 2017-19 budget cycle. The Capital Project Fund has also accumulated sufficient fund balance over the years. This concludes my presentation.
Mayor, I have one other addition to add to the draft CIP description, and that is on page 16 of the draft. There is a project description regarding the courtyard. After we published, staff realized that the project description here is inaccurate, and what we'll plan on bringing to you when you adopt the CIP is a revised description. This draft description describes the project as environmental remediation and then renovation of the existing building. The project actually has for a while now been described as environmental remediation and demolition of the existing building. So I wanted to highlight that to you now, and then you'll see that final version when you adopt the CIP.
Thank you.
So, Madam Mayor, just to reiterate, what's before you tonight is the proposed CIP for the City Council's comment and feedback and suggestions. Based on what we hear tonight, then we'll return to you on June 4th with the proposed final CIP for consideration for adoption. I just also want to reflect back on the last slide that Ms. Shea presented with regard to use of fund balance reserves for the South Bayfront Bridge. That would not be included in your proposed CIP if the council approves the contract that will be proposed, assuming that that's the feedback we get tonight. At your May 21st meeting, in order to award that contract, we would need to appropriate both the reserves and the general capital fund balance for that contract. So we would likely present the contract and the appropriation of funds as part of this fiscal year. So I just wanted to, it's a little nuanced, but I didn't want to have confusion when we come forward in May 21st. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any clarifying questions on that? Yes, Member Martinez.
I would like a little bit more description on the Adeline sites, Chad. Which I've seen from outside of the fence, but...
Okay, so yes, thank you, Chadwick Smalley, Economic Development and Housing Manager. The Adeline site is a small parcel on Adeline, that's why we call it the Adeline sites, and it's mostly located in the jurisdiction of the City of Oakland. It was acquired by the former redevelopment agency as using housing funds, and it's located right behind the City Line building. The intent was at the time to assemble a larger parcel, including City Line. That plan never came to fruition. As we all know, the agency is gone, and so now these are held by the city as housing successor. So it's a housing asset that requires affordable housing to be developed on it. We plan to address the disposition and proposal for that site as part of the expenditure plan for the affordable housing bond.
And are there other houses on that parcel, like adjacent to what the city?
An adjacent house, yes. There's a home adjacent to the parcel. The parcel itself it does not have a home on it, though.
Okay. And, all right, that was my question.
In fact, we received notice from the City of Oakland that they may assess the vacant property tax against us on that property.
Okay.
How nice of them.
Hope we thanked them for that update. Any other clarifying questions? All right, I'm going to open this up. Oh, yeah.
I have another clarifying question. On the source of funds, I didn't see listed the commercial transfer tax, but now I see it here listed. So what's with that? Why wasn't that?
Second bullet's
Right there.
Okay, I'm sorry.
There's a lot on that slide. So.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no further clarifying questions, we'll open this up for public comment. Anyone who wants to comment, come up and do so.
I didn't see a time to comment on the part about what the funds are going to be used for, so I'm going to ask now. Are any of the funds, because there's a particular spot on going down the walkway near Shellmount Street over from Hollis, the pedestrian walkway on the other side, underneath where cars pass through, if there's going to be a spot for there to add a crosswalk, because a bus comes, drops people off, go across the street, if there's a room to add that type of thing in there. I don't know if this was the appropriate time to ask that, but it sounded like it was since he brought up the thing of where the funds are going to be used for. And let me know if you have any other questions on what I'm asking via the Brown Act.
No questions. Any other public comment? Okay, let's start discussing this. First of all, thank you for a thorough presentation. I know there's a lot on the slides because you're doing a lot of work. And we all recognize that this is a very big CIP list. So, yeah, I want to start this off. You know, Scott, John and I have discussed this at transportation, so I'd like to hear from some of my colleagues. Member Martinez?
Yeah, I want to thank staff for all of the hard work that went into this. And is it methacrylate? Is that how you say it?
That's correct.
Methacrylate. I love new words. I just want to kick off with the fact that South Bayfront bike ped bridge, we need to finish what we started. So I'm definitely in favor of making sure that that's funded and at the front of the line. And then just call out a couple of other projects that I appreciate staff adding to the new list. A greenway that connects with Mandela is, you know, that's been mentioned up here on the dais before, and I'm in full support. As well as I know Member Pats has mentioned the last time we brought this up, the bathroom at Temescal Creek Park, and in support of that as well. Again, this is a very long, extensive list, and I appreciate all of the work that staff has done. I just wanted to highlight a couple of those items.
Okay. Member Donahue?
I totally agree about finishing what we've started on the South Bayfront Bridge. And of course, all those projects that we looked at, I would love them to all happen. I am concerned that we're not seeming to find a way to purchase new land for future parks in this capital plan. And, you know, it's, as our population increases, it's going to be a factor. We've got to somehow not encumber maybe all the commercial transfer tax, or find some way to build up some kind of budget for buying land for parks. And, you know, maybe those on the Budget Finance Committee could talk about that. You know, in year 4 and 5, we're going to start to need those parks as our community is being built out more. Where could that money come from?
Yeah. Okay. Member Pats or Vice Mayor Pats?
So as I went through this, I got sad every time I got to a discretionary item, because it was always a low ticket item that was discretionary.
They aren't all low. This is discretionary as well. That's where the council priorities
Call it discretionary, but I won't share that view. And so I appreciate the work on this. And so that was my thought. You hit the bathroom is my big thing. I'm still waiting for my tour, or to take you on the tour. I need to schedule that. So.
Ooh, wow, what an offer.
Tour of the park.
Professionalism, Mayor. When you're 30, you'll understand.
Tomorrow, folks, tomorrow.
She turns 30.
She turns 30 tomorrow.
So, and with that, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay.
I get to save you? Okay. I thank you for the presentation. I think it's very comprehensive. I appreciate staff's thoughtfulness on this item, and I would like to just echo the comments of all my colleagues. The prioritization of these projects, the bridge is not discretionary at this point. I agree with the financing plan for the capital improvement project in regards to tax increment. And yeah, I think that one of the big things for the council just to think about, I'm happy to see the 40th Street cycle track that we've already agreed on being extended to MacArthur is something that Mayor Medina brought up at Transportation Committee a while back that I'm very supportive of, and I know she's supportive of my interest in having the Greenway connect to Mandela. We've talked about how to get those things done, and so I just would tell the rest of the council I'm supportive of all the other things you've mentioned. We just really have an opportunity, I think, in the next couple of years regionally to pull money in to do these projects. So let's keep doing good things.
I think we've got a consensus on the bridge being our number one priority still, and thank you for pushing through this monster project. if this doesn't work out, we're just gonna have to like form a human chain where we launch bikes over ourselves over there or something. But I think, you know, we've got a lot of excellent things in here. I did want to highlight, I really like the addition into our repaving plan of the possible pilot park. I don't have a better name for this. I'm going to call it a pop-up park for now. They call them Leefstraten in Dutch, living streets, which I think is a really lame word, and we can improve on that. But I'd like to expand that concept actually to a couple other sites in here, and I think it ties into what Member Donahue brought up about us looking at how we're going to be able to provide parks for the community in the long term, and it's something I think we need to bear in our minds during the budget discussions coming up. For the quiet zones, which item is that? Sorry,
Quiet zone?
yes. I think we also might have an opportunity, if there's been a discussion of a street closure, to look at another space to put in a park if we're going to be closing down part of a street and dead-ending one. If my colleagues are favorable to that, I'd like to also consider that site for a pop-up park. And furthermore, I would like to add an item and to look up at possibly finding grants to fund more pop-up parks, because when you look at the cost of buying new land in Emeryville, it's exorbitantly expensive. But the city has a bunch of land we have just chosen to use for a certain reason, and that's streets. We choose to use streets just for cars and parking, and we don't need every single street that we have. I've gone through the map and I've identified some streets that I think we could take little bits of. I would like to systematically look at how we use our space in the city, because we already do own a lot of land here that's not, you know, being allocated to other uses besides cars, and see if we could turn some of that sites into parks. And I will just call that pop-up parks for now. That is my proposal. If people are in favor of adding that as an item that I can help find funding for.
I like it.
I'm supportive of it.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Call it pop-up parks until someone comes up with a better name. Christine said Village Greens sounded too English. The untragedy of the commons. I don't know. Come up with something. Okay, is that enough direction on that item?
So Mayor, just to clarify, T04, which is the quiet zones, would include some reference to that, and then we'd create a new project in the unfunded category to describe the notion to hold that concept in the CIP.
Yes, please.
So we'll bring that back on the 4th.
Thank you.
That's all we need.
Member Butters?
I just wanted to ask a clarifying legal question, because I support what she's just asked for, but in terms of in our plan, referring to parks in the quiet zones, perhaps it should be a separate CIP item, because I just don't want the very restricted funds that are being used for rail to be a concern from the state that we're going to do other things with it. I think we should separate them just
Not
for the
include that in T4, but
yeah, I would give
include
it
in a
its
separate
own
project.
give it its own
Fine.
number, please.
Yes.
And we can recognize that that's one area we will be taking a look at, but I think that's probably wise.
In the
Yes,
separate
I
project.
think they should be separate.
Okay, totally fine. We've got a separate item for it now, so cool. Thank you. That went faster than I thought. Next item, 12.3, business condition survey results. I believe we have a staff report.
Good evening, council members, Madam Mayor.
Good evening.
April, would you mind redirecting the microphone?
Okay. Wrong one. Okay, so this evening I'm going to give you just a brief overview of our business condition survey results, and I'll hand it off to Mills College. Sharon from Mills will give you more detail. Just to give you a little background, on July 2nd, 2015, we adopted the minimum wage, paid sick leave, and hospitality surcharge ordinance. In 2018, jumping to 2018, Emeryville hit the highest minimum wage nationwide. at $15.69 and for large businesses and $15 for small businesses. This year, both small and large businesses will meet at $16.30 as it is set in the ordinance at this time. This slide I know you can't view, but it's in your packet. It's just an inventory of the minimum wages across our region, some smaller cities, our neighboring cities actually. And it just outlines what the wages are, at what pace everyone's wage is increasing, and then it also gives you ordinance provisions that some are similar to Emeryville and there are some differences. So if you refer to your packets, it's attachment 1 in your packet. In late 2016, we also adopted the Fair Workweek Ordinance, which became effective July 1st. Enforcement became effective January of the following year. There was interest expressed by the council to further evaluate labor standards, much like we did in 2016. Mills College also did that survey. And in summer 2018, the new study was conducted in addition to our staff efforts to perform outreach, education, and monitoring of all of the labor standards. Just to give you some research context, again, California leads the nation, and Emeryville leads the state on minimum wage rates as it is outlined in attachment 1. It is a complex and varied landscape, as you can see in attachment 1 as well. Somewhat, not all cities have adopted paid sick leave benefits. Very few have established scheduling ordinances. There are varied wage rules, and just based on our own research and reading articles that have been published, researchers still seem to be determining the effectiveness and impacts of various local interventions. So from that, we found out that due to the complexity of these circumstances, it'll take several years to really determine the true impact of the labor standards on businesses as well as on employees. Information sources used to study our labor standards in general have been basic information on the incidence of noncompliance, and there's a chart in your packet as well on our monitoring and compliance cases that we have received and resolved or that are pending. Measurements of self-reported business responses, which is the survey we'll discuss tonight, and information regarding our Emeryville restaurant businesses, since they were found to be the most impacted in the 2016 study. So there was a particular focus on restaurants this time around because of the results in 2016. So our Mills team contacted over 300 businesses between June and August of 2018. They achieved a response rate of 30%, which is 10% lower than 2016. The highest response was from retail, followed by food services, restaurants, cafes, and bars. 18 industries were represented in the survey, and the overall results, again, was retail have been relatively resilient, but restaurants seem to be impacted by our labor standards. So Sharon from Mills College will give you more detail on the survey results, and I'll come back up if you have further questions about my presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Medina, Vice Mayor Pats, members of the council, city staff, and Emeryville residents. My name is Sharon DeCosta, and I'm a graduating public policy student at the Mills College Loria Loki School of Business and Public Policy. I'm here to present the findings of the 2018 Business Conditions Study conducted by Mills last summer. Also representing Mills here tonight is the Dean of the Loki School, Dr. Kate Kanashina, who supervised this project and will be available to answer questions at the end of my presentation. So the agenda for tonight is I will first give you an overview of our data collection process and share the sample characteristics. I will then cover the perceived impact of city ordinances as reported by the business owners and managers. Next, we'll zoom in on the retail and food industry here in Emeryville, as the food industry has been identified as a potential problem area during the last round of data collection. And these two industries have been impacted by the newest Fair Work Week ordinance. I end with the businesses' plans and their thoughts on areas where the city could provide additional support. As touched upon by the staff member, for the purpose of the study, 311 businesses in Emeryville were reached out to. This was done through business site visits by the Mill Survey team, via emails with online links attached, with the online survey link attached, and we also met up with businesses at one of the quarterly BizNexus meetings held last August. We'd like to thank the city and EDAC for allowing us access to the event. So for the purpose of context, I will briefly take you through the key characteristics of the businesses that responded to our survey. In terms of the industry, we see that the food services and retail businesses made up majority of our sample. When it comes to the business size, according to the number of employees, we see that our sample pretty much reflected the type of businesses in Emeryville, whereby majority are small with 55 or less employees. 9% of our respondents were large businesses, that is, they had 56 or more employees. I now move into the reactions that we received with regard to how the various city ordinances have impacted the businesses, with specific focus on the impacts of the minimum wage, paid sick leave, and Fair Work Week ordinance, since these impact the businesses directly. However, the report that's included in the meeting packet for today will give you further details on the overall reactions we received from the city businesses. So when we examined how businesses...
Speak a little bit more into the mic. Yeah, okay, perfect.
Yeah,
there we go.
Thank you.
So when we examined how businesses reacted to the three ordinances, we see a lot of mixed reactions to each. On one end of the spectrum, you have businesses who were positive on the minimum wage in that they saw a spike in the job applications, in the job applications received. They also saw an increase in employee morale and productivity as a result of minimum wage, as well as paid sick leave and the Fair Work Week ordinances. While on the other hand, you also have respondents who claimed that their business was worse and that they experienced a decrease in employee productivity and morale due to the three city ordinances. Qualitative comments reported compression between the various job levels and little desire to be promoted. Business owners expressed concerns about the morale of their higher qualified workers and general strain on their already thin margins. Moving on to the impact that the 2017 minimum wage hike has had on businesses, we see that the biggest side effect was that businesses resorted to increasing their prices. We also have more than half who reported that they have adjusted to the increase by allocating fewer hours to their employees. A third of businesses noted needing to reduce the number of employees in order to adjust to the minimum wage increase. So we compared the general reactions to the minimum wage increase obtained from this sample to reactions similar measures that we received from the previous business conditions survey conducted 2 years ago. If we exclude skipped responses and group the data based on general negative, neutral, and positive sentiment, we see that the support for the minimum wage ordinance is shrinking while the opposition is growing. And this result persists if we control for industry membership. In terms of changes in payroll costs for the financial year 2017-18, we see that a majority, that is 60%, reported an increase in their payroll costs, while 23% saw no change, and around 17% reported a drop in their payroll costs. This was a two-part question, and when we asked businesses about the reasons for this increase, we see that for some, the reasons are not mutually exclusive. While a majority linked the cost to the increase in wages, we see that there is an overlap between all three categories. Some of the increased negative reaction to minimum wage could be linked to the overall profitability of the local businesses. Businesses in our sample reported shrinking revenues and increased costs. Only 30% reported substantial increases in revenues, while 70% reported increased costs. I will now zoom into the retail industry responses. So when we compared to the restaurant businesses, which we will get to in a bit, we saw that the retail industry feels a lot more positive about minimum wage, with nearly 50% leaning toward the sentiment on grounds that they believe that it was good or fair, or that it does not affect their businesses. We also have around 38% businesses with a neutral reaction, and a small 10% of the retailers reporting negative reactions. Here, once again, we see that the costs are skyrocketing while revenues are not for retail businesses. We also see that a lot more businesses are showing increasing costs compared to the increasing revenues. However, the revenues are stable or growing for at least 50% of the businesses. Further, when we ask retailers what their high priority concerns were with regard to functioning in the city, if we zoom in on the three major concerns, we see that at this point in time, the retailers are primarily concerned with the increasing rents and property values, followed by personal cost of living and parking management. I now move to the data specific to the food sector. So with regard to the minimum wage sentiment among the restaurant industry, we see that not only is there a drastically higher negative response, some of the responses in the other category brought out negative sentiments as well. So we dug further and compared the reactions to franchise versus independent restaurants towards minimum wage, and we found that while the franchise managers were overwhelmingly in support of the ordinance, the independent restaurant owners and managers exhibit very strong opposition to minimum wage. Currently, 67% of all independent restaurant owners oppose the measure compared to 20% of franchise managers. The differences between the franchise and non-franchise support levels are significant at a 95% confidence level. Qualitative comments shed some light on the reasons for such negative opinion, and we have restaurant owners who said that they feel that the hikes are taking place too rapidly and not giving businesses a chance to adjust to the new levels. Even if they raise prices, these increases are countered by increased raw material costs and skyrocketing rents. They do not feel that raising prices even further is realistic without losing their current clientele. When we broke down the minimum wage sentiment of businesses according to their age of establishment, we see that the younger businesses are more likely to be okay with the minimum wage ordinance. Qualitative data suggests that these establishments knew the rules before entering the game, and so their business model reflects higher labor costs with corresponding price points and levels of labor intensity. However, when we added the information about whether or not the restaurant is a franchise, we noticed the results for more established restaurants are driven by the previously mentioned differences between franchise and non-franchise establishments. If we look at independently owned restaurants, it is clear that only the new restaurants are faring okay in this environment. When we look at the key changes that the restaurant industry reported to have made since 2017, we see almost 76% restaurants reported increases in payroll costs. We have 52% restaurants claiming a drop in workers' hours, while 33% seem to have resorted to decreasing the number of employees. These are the top concerns outlined by the restaurant industry. If we zoom in on the top three, we see that parking management came up as the most critical challenge, followed by taxes and regulations and personal cost of living. In terms of planning to move from Emeryville, compared to 2016, we have more businesses saying that they are considering taking their businesses outside of Emeryville. Given our sample size in both studies, this increase is significant. And the picture looks more worrisome for the restaurant industry. Among 20% of all businesses who were considering moving from Emeryville, 71% said that they were doing so as a result of city policies and taxes or lack of support from City Hall. 52% attributed their reasons for moving to the local economic issues such as rent, parking, etc. 10% were doing so due to workforce reduction, and 48% had other reasons such as the slowdown in Bay Street traffic, requiring more space, poor property management, or the general high cost of living. Please note that the participants were allowed to choose multiple reasons, and therefore the percentages in this figure do not sum up to 100. In terms of anticipated challenges brought out by all businesses, here again we have the personal cost of living, taxes and regulations, and the ability to invest or make changes to businesses, which emerged as the top 3 challenges. Lastly, when we asked about how the city could support their businesses, a majority, that is 63%, requested for the city's assistance in marketing for their products. Second in rank were requests from 53% businesses for additional tax rebates. 37% requested for more resources on the city's website, and 36% wanted that email announcements of trainings and events be shared. Finally, 25% asked for support in the area of making trade connections, and 10% shared that office hours with the City Council and staff would help them. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Should we do clarifying questions now, or do we have more presentation to go?
I just kind of want to tie it together or wrap it up.
Okay.
It's a lot of information, and we just want you to acknowledge the fact that this is self-reporting from a small sample of business, well, a decent size of businesses. But as you saw in my presentation, it's a complex landscape. So I just want to put it in perspective that there's more pieces to the puzzle, and this is just a perspective that we're getting from this sample of businesses.
Thank you. All right, clarifying questions? I have a few, if no one else does. Yeah, regarding the survey specifically, why was the choice made to focus primarily on business owners exclusively and not talk to survey workers and the impact of workers in Emeryville?
Yeah, so we have various answers. So we did a worker study for Fair Work Week. We did a study under the direction of the council at the time in 2016 on businesses, with the plan to come back and do another study on businesses. So,
okay.
Yeah, I kind of fleshed that out a little bit. It's really difficult to reach the worker population in a cost-efficient way. We learned this during Fair Work Week. We spent a lot of time puzzling around how to get to that universe of people, and where we landed was the best solution that we could come up with was literally sending an army of survey takers out and catching people in parking lots and on the street, because otherwise the only real efficient communication channel to the workers is their employer, which can skew the data, and oftentimes, frankly, especially larger employers, big chain stores, they won't let us talk to them at all. And so it's either intercept surveys or potentially some relatively expensive way of targeting through Facebook ads, incentivizing the survey takers. So that's the reason that we have not undertaken to do that. We would be interested in exploring that once Fair Work Week has matured as a policy, to go back and try to replicate that, but it's going to depend upon the resources available to us at the time, because it's an expensive undertaking.
Thank you. Okay, one of the first couple slides you had, what's the impact of this on your business as a survey question, and most of the 2 columns, some said negative, some said positive, did not add up to 50, so I'm assuming the rest of that was neutral, which was not on the graph. Like most people said, this had a neutral or no impact. Is that how the survey was designed?
Some of the questions could be skipped. So there is, if they're not tying to a perfect 100, that means that some people skipped that question. We didn't have the forced answer to the question.
Yes.
Oh. Sorry, we didn't have the forced answer to the questions. We allowed people to continue if they were not comfortable to answer some of the questions.
Was the option there for businesses the same between businesses worse and businesses better, or decreased productivity, increased productivity? Was there a same productivity option there?
That was the no change. There was the NA option.
Okay, so no change. So, that's the delta here is the no change. So for all of these, 50% was basically no change.
Yeah.
Okay, so the most common answer to the impact of this was no change, which I just think wasn't represented, but is kind of the looming elephant I'm seeing in this data. Another question is, when you asked the question of tax policies.
I just want to get, before we move on, because that's a really important point, I just want to make sure you are saying exactly what she just asked. I just want to be clear, and staff agrees. So when you look at businesses worse, okay, that adds up to 79% on that graph on the screen right now on the very far left.
No, that's for Fair Work Week, paid sick leave, and minimum wage.
They're three separate questions.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Three separate questions.
So
sorry,
for
sorry.
businesses better, businesses worse, that adds up to 47%. And so we got 53% no change then.
So
So
to clarify, is it no change or no answer?
We asked whether any of these ordinances resulted in any of the following. And if they indicated that the business is better or business is worse, that was recorded on this graph.
I see. So it wasn't like a option menu. It was like, my business is better. They could just mark yes or no.
Yes.
Business is worse, yes or no. So there was no selection for no change. It just wasn't an option. But they had the options of yes or no. So if they didn't think it was yes or no, they just marked neither on both of those boxes.
Yes.
So it's an empty set.
It's a no answer.
It's a no answer empty set.
Okay, so the majority is not answered. Okay. Next step, one of the number one concerns for businesses listed later on here was tax policies, city policies, and taxes. Why was the decision made to conflate the two? Because we had a new tax plan this year, in addition to city policies that have been ongoing, and some just, I think if we're seeing that being a significant concern, it's hard for me to parse out what is city and what is the new federal tax plan as an impact.
That's a good point. We actually went with the same structure of the question as we asked 2 years ago. So we kind of wanted the comparison, and you bring up a very valid point that there was a new change in tax that we did not really account for with this.
Okay.
Some of the questions we just asked in the identical format to the survey 2 years ago in order to provide direct comparisons.
Okay, I get that. Just, trying to clarify what the data is here. And I think I had another question. After the first year of the minimum wage ordinance, we received an impact study that talked about the total number of businesses open and closed. Do we have that information for now after a few years? Because this is all self-reporting, which you did a great job of highlighting. I've seen a lot of studies where they've done self-reporting on businesses, on complete streets, where after they take out parking and put in bike lanes, everyone self-reports that they've dropped retails 33%. Sales tax receipts show a very different record. So I just want to, as much as possible, get some hard data here. Do we have the open and closure?
I think you're referring to page 4 and the staff report.
Of which one? The City of Emeryville
Right.
Business Conditions Report?
So are you referring to page 4 and the staff report where we talk about industry taxable sales, and then following that is openings and closures?
Yeah, okay. Can you review that then?
Sure. Sorry, I didn't make a slide for that. So basically, we also found that this was a little bit muddy. I mean, maybe Chad can help me out with this, but this was a little bit muddy because of so many variables. But as far as sales by year, it seemed to be that it was pretty flat and consistent, like a consistent move up, and then was pretty flat between 2015 and 2016 would be which would be the period of time that we rolled out the minimum wage ordinance. And then as far as openings and closures, we found that there was somewhat, and this is page 6, as far as restaurant locations, we got a dip in, a decline in 2015, a slight increase in 2016, and then a rise in 2018. But this was inclusive of several comings and goings in the public market. Public market had a huge, the changes there had a huge impact on this. So, you want to?
Can I chime in?
Okay.
And that's just for restaurants?
'Cause that's
That's
just,
just for
so we only
restaurants, yeah.
performed that analysis for restaurants this time. And the reason is because the data set on further review, the openings and closings was pulled from business license data.
Mm-hmm.
And the openings is a pretty good metric. That is something that, folks come in, they get a business license, so that's relatively accurate. But the closings is not, using business licenses to measure closings is not adequate because those are sort of voluntarily sent in, oh, I don't want my business license this year. It never really corresponds to a particular point in time and depends entirely on where we are at in the business license renewal cycle. So it's not, we felt like it wasn't good data, frankly, to use to talk about that. Plus, there's the added fact that we can do it with a limited universe of businesses a little bit easier because we know which restaurants have opened and closed when we look at what they report in terms of taxable receipts. But other types of businesses don't necessarily show up on those reports because they don't have taxable receipts. And those types of businesses, frankly, many of them don't have that many minimum wage workers. Mm-hmm. So in lieu of doing something that was based on somewhat suspect data, we elected to focus on restaurants for the openings and closings and the taxable sales because that we know we have good data for.
Okay. And so, again, what you found was a dip in 2015, but a slight increase now in 2018.
Yes, and that is principally due to the public markets rehabilitation. I also want to point out that this taxable sales data that we use there is not all of the restaurants. That's only same store sales. It's a concept used to measure the performance of a particular location over time. So it took only the restaurants that were open in 2015 or earlier, I can't recall that at the top of my head, and that were also open in the latest reporting period. Yeah. So everything else has been filtered out and everything with suspect data was filtered out. So this is meant to be a measure of how do restaurants that have been here this whole time perform in terms of sales. It doesn't tell us anything about profitability, but it tells us what their market looks like. And when you compare it with the locations, you could arrive at the conclusion that there's more restaurants now than there was then, and that the pie has been split more ways.
Okay, thank you. Any other clarifying questions? All right, let's open this up for public comment on this item.
Yeah, I would like to piggyback onto what the mayor said. I think way more useful information in the future would be to query the workers. I think we should go ahead and spend the extra money. I mean, if you're a skeptic, you realize that money is a corrupting influence, and every person in this survey is materially connected to their business, obviously, and nobody likes to pay more for anything. So they would not tend to say that they don't like this ordinance. So I mean, like, it almost seems that at this point, since we're not getting opening data, and I agree with the reasons seem kind of dubious, or no, the reasons are dubious, the data is dubious. Seems to me this doesn't really have much value. We're just asking business owners, do you want to pay more? And they're going to say no. So it just doesn't seem like we should be spending money. I think we should, next iteration in a few years or whatever, we should be talking to the workers. Like, how is this affecting your life? Like, so we can, because that's really what we need to find out. Like, pardon me. We need to, to set public policy. It's got to be based on the people. I mean, we're trying to make a town livable town here for the people, not the businesses. As I said earlier, are here at our pleasure, at least as far as anything beyond the California and U.S. Constitution is concerned. So I just think we should query the workers from now on this, especially since I just said that opening closing data is dubious. But having said all that, I think it's sort of remarkable that there's so many positive responses from the businesses. I mean, I was kind of surprised when I read the study, especially in the retail sector. They have every reason to say that they don't like the law, And a lot of them are saying that they like it. It's actually, a majority are saying that it's either neutral or positive. So that, actually, I was kind of surprised at that, actually. That was one piece of valuable information. But other than that, I just don't really see much value here. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
That's fine. Go ahead, Bill.
My name's Bill Reuter. Among other things, in the city, I serve as a resident member of the Economic Development Advisory Committee. We had a chance, of course, to look at these reports and earlier versions of them. I would just say one thing. It's very, very difficult to measure these things precisely or to get any clear, accurate, complete picture at any given moment. We need a couple of 3 more years to figure out the true overall impact of these measures. Keep that complexity issue in mind. I think one thing is very clear. Restaurant industry is the one, especially smaller ones, most affected by the changes in the minimum wage. Other than that, keep that complexity issue very firmly in your minds as you're assessing the impact of these policies.
My name's Marilyn Boucher. My husband and I own the Broken Rack. Memorial Day weekend is our 21st anniversary of opening here. So we fit that category in the report, the long-standing, small, independent restaurant that is most seriously impacted by this minimum wage ordinance. I'm also a member of EDAC, and I feel rather aggrieved about this process. Back in 2015, council members said that the reason that there was going to be an ordinance, which could be passed by 3 council members or more, it was 5 in the end, instead of the measure, which would go to a general vote, was so that the ordinance could be amended if it was shown that it was needed to be. And the business conditions study was supposed to be a protection for businesses, I believe, to see that if that was too harmful to them, that there could be some consideration of amending. From July 1, 2015, when the minimum wage was still technically $9, since it changed the next day, and July 1st of this year, the minimum wage for small businesses has gone up $7.30. That's 81% in 4 years. That's a lot. When I say I'm aggrieved about the process, when the report came to the EDAC committee, it was number 6.2 on the agenda. When we got to that point, there was 20 minutes left in the message. I stated my immediate opinion that this study presented a strong case for deferring the joining of the small business and large business minimum wage. However, there wasn't really time to discuss that at any length. And I, stated that this is killing us now. It was the first 37% jump from 9 to 12.25. We weathered that pretty well and going to 13. But now that we've gone on to 14.15 and 16.30, it's killing us. And I asked the committee if we could have a special meeting because I felt this subject needed more than 20 minutes of attention. And Chad and the committee members were willing to do that. One was scheduled and Vice Mayor Pats attended, which I appreciated. However, not enough committee members attended. So there was no quorum, there was no discussion. And now, when originally this report I understood was going to be presented to the council maybe in March or something, here we are in May, and if I understand the situation correctly, there's absolutely nothing that could be done about the next scheduled increase to 16.30. Do I have to give up my time or?
Do.
All right.
Thank you.
I'll give up my time for her.
One of the things that makes the restaurant industry special is that tips, and we live in one of the 7 states that don't have a tip credit. So one of the things that when this went first into law in 2015, the only employees of ours that were making minimum wage were tipped employees. And they were already making $25 to $35 an hour, which was part of the frustration in the restaurant industry about this. The initial increase affected us more than them, and you know, as it goes on, it's the employees that are already earning the most money that continue to profit, whereas there's been a wage compression with the rest of the employees. When we went to 13, I gave a bump to everybody, a little bump of some kind, except for a couple of the top. And that was the last time I was able to do that. So as the minimum wage increases, there's the gap between people in the back of the house, the kitchen workers, the managers who don't receive tips has continually shrunk. So when you look at this report about morale being raised or lowered, it's because there's two disparate groups in the restaurant industries. There's the people that are seeing their wages continue to go up, although their tips aren't necessarily going up in the same proportion because sales can be down. And then there's the people who are sitting there and could very well have expected a raise in the last 4 years, if not 2, and have gotten no raises or very minimal raises, and all of a sudden they're making the same wage as people who are making $25 or $30. They're all that additional tip income, which they don't participate, or only to a small percent. There's some tip outs to kitchen and so forth. So that's definitely impacted the morale of people in the back of the. There's also the idea of fairness and what's good for employees in general. And as this points out, the minimum wage has reduced the number of employment hours. There's less work out there. Now, the only other person on the EDAC who is also in the restaurant business is a newer arriving business. They arrived after the MWO. They set their prices accordingly, and they also changed their business plan from full service at lunch, which is their busy time, to counter service. So it brought less work in because of the minimum wage. Some people are less able to get entry work because people frankly don't feel like paying them that much. $16 or more. It's always expensive to hire more people. And there's also been this redistribution of money to staff. So
that's your time. Thank you. Any more public comment on this item?
City Council members and Mayor, I'm Doug Smith from Rudy's Campfield Cafe. Similar to this, I have to second everything I just heard. It absolutely is accurate. One thing to keep in mind is that when we raise our lowest paid worker, we have to raise everybody else. And so on top of that, we have to pay workers' compensation, we have to pay payroll taxes, and regardless of what is planned for July 1st, I would express a desire to have it reviewed, at least to be reconsidered, because the small independent businesses in Emeryville are going to disappear. And you're going to be left with all the large corporations and everybody else that you can get in any city. It's part of the character of the city of Emeryville. I understand the laws passed, the minimum wage ordinance in place, but $16.30 from $15 an hour is going to hurt all the small employers, and particularly restaurant businesses. One thing that we don't want to do is to lose our customers, and we've already had to raise our prices, and we already feel a lack of that rush of business that we have had in the past. I don't want to stand up here and cry, we aren't making enough money, but if you look at New York City, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Emeryville is above all these cities in minimum wage. And we are really at a loss to try to be profitable. There may be more restaurants, according to your survey, but those restaurants are not full service restaurants. They're going to be counter places, they're going to be places where you take a number, there's less employees, and that's the future of this city's food service industry we want to be here. You know, we want to continue to serve Emeryville. So I'm speaking up on behalf of the restaurants in Emeryville and the small independent ones that may not be able to survive the increases in minimum wage going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nicole, and I don't own a restaurant. I'm just a citizen here. And I want to say that since we had that wage increase, I still go to the Gap. I still go to some corporate places because they did not raise their prices. But we live close to Doyle Street Cafe, and I can say that before the increase, I probably went there 2 to 3 times a month. And last year I went twice. And I know a lot of people who, you know, that we don't work in high tech, we don't have really high income. And so for us to go out and go to a restaurant where we are served, we make that decision. Before that, it might have been $20 a person to go out and say, that's, you know, that's reasonable for dinner. Now it might be 30 or more. And then we go to the public market where we are served, you know, from a counter, and it's much cheaper. So I know that you didn't survey consumers to ask how our behavior changed, but I can tell you for sure that my behavior changed and a lot of my neighbors' behavior has changed.
Thank you. Any additional public comment on this item?
I just want to say what happens when people aren't paid enough money to be able to make it, to be able to have somewhere to live, to be able to get into the places they need to work, then they stop working at those places. And I can tell you from being in London that by late afternoon, evening, a lot of the places that used to be open are all closed up, and they're closed up because they can't get the staff to come in and work. And I think that's an important consideration to think about is can you get the staff if you're not paying them, given what's happened in the Bay Area? And there are multiple factors, and I think finding a reasonable rental or home to be in, everything like that, it's just really hard. And I feel if we don't, we have a moral imperative to pay people enough money so they can make it, so they're not sick, so they can work in places, particularly food places. And I just feel that if we don't pay them, we won't have the staff. We've seen that with a couple of restaurants where they just couldn't keep the staff because the staff were coming from so far away. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Letty Farrell. To the previous lady's point, why doesn't Emeryville adopt rent control? Because if we're trying to create that problem by just raising the minimum wage costs, well, if people can't afford to hire people, then we need to look at rent control. That's another factor in this too. Thank you.
Any more public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, I'm going to open this up for discussion. Member Martinez?
Thank you, Mayor Medina. I want to thank staff for bringing this forward and acknowledge April for bringing up the complexity of the landscape. And there are a lot of pressures on our local businesses that include our labor standards, but also, as you have mentioned, include raw materials and rent and other mitigating factors. I also want to thank our partners at Mills. I appreciate the work that you do, and I've experienced it a couple of times now, so I know that you work with a lot of academic rigor, and I do appreciate that. At the same time, I'm glad that the mayor brought up that this council is interested in hearing from the workers and their life experiences and their measure of their quality of life. I think that's important when we are looking at this kind of data And especially when council can make changes when it comes to policy, I think it's important to not only get the business conditions, but the worker conditions as well. You know, there was a lot of interesting data in this report, and there are concerns that I think that we should take seriously. And I just want to acknowledge that I hear from especially our independent restaurant community that there's a burden, and I hear that.
All right. Member Donahue?
One of the most telling pieces of this was the same store sales that did rise in the last year, a little over 2%. And these were businesses that were here prior to the minimum wage going up. So that seems to indicate that it is not, our minimum wage is not catastrophic, that they're still showing some increase in gross income to the store. Yes, their expenses may have gone up when it comes to employees, but that's indicating that there's no catastrophe here to restaurants as I see it. And but you know, we'll have to look and see if the newer restaurants are surviving more easily, as we heard, partly because they came in under the premise of the minimum wage. And yes, maybe we're going to have less full-service restaurants in our city than before.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Pats?
So I love the numbers and the survey results, and I appreciate that. But I also took a look at one of the restaurants, and I won't name names, that emailed us with their concerns and that attributed the decline in sales to the increase in costs and prices. And for me, I take that very serious. It's a really important thing, but I compared that store's performance, thanks to the wonders of the internet, with the overall, it was a franchise. And what happens at that store based on the email is happening nationwide for that particular style of restaurant, specifically that franchise brand. And this is one of the things, Mayor Bowder's favorite restaurant, Taco Bell, did a study years ago that determined...
I have never been to a Taco Bell.
I have pictures.
But I live in a Taco Bell household.
I didn't yield my time.
Sorry, you can reclaim it.
Thank you. They did a study, almost 30 years ago, and they discovered that it's repeat customers that are more profitable than anything else. And so they lowered their prices on their items to not attract new customers, but to get the encouragement of customers to come repeatedly. And that became their business model. And that's still to this day the restaurant business model. It's not the older people like myself who goes out and makes it an event. It's really that repeat customer. And while I hear the costs and I hear the concerns, restaurant models are moving to this counter model, are moving to the fewer employees, partially driven by labor costs, but also driven by the avocado toast generation. And so it has just shifted things. So I do appreciate the study and I do appreciate the concerns, but I go back to what Member Donahue said. It's the new openings and it's the year-over-year sales that matter, and a lot of it is the shifting economy that we're in. So I'm really excited to see what it looks like in a few more years, particularly as we go through a downturn.
I'm less excited about a downturn yielding results.
It's data. It's good data.
Okay. I agree with what I've heard from EDAC, is that I think, the data is sparse on these kind of things. We have a very small population to draw from, so having statistical anomalies, some of these charts we're looking at like 10 people. It's very hard to get great data sets out of this, and I know it's a big effort, and so I do appreciate that. I wish we had heard more from workers, and I think somebody here made a great point about consumer behavior shifts, and that's, again, very difficult for us to study, but it's important for us to know how this interacts. There's an oft-repeated statistic. I come from a labor background. I worked for an SEIU local, and one thing we say is when we were fighting to increase the minimum wage, which wouldn't even impact the workers I was working to represent, right? Because they were hospital workers who all made above $15 an hour in California. Lowest paid workers were around $18 an hour. Environmental services workers, still too low in my opinion, to do that work. But we fought to increase the minimum wage because it would bring up the floor and the standard of living for everyone. And we fought for that $15 an hour really aggressively, and we pressed the legislator where the legislator had failed through that effort. But one thing we do like to say is that, there's raising the minimum wage helps livability. On the other side, every dollar spent in a local business stays in the community. And that's another thing that we talk about a lot, the importance of small local businesses and local community. One thing I'm seeing here on this chart, and I'm looking at Berkeley, El Cerrito, Emeryville, Oakland, Richmond here, the chart that was given out by staff I think is really fantastic. It shows us where we are in line. What Diane and Scott did by kind of pushing for this minimum wage increase is they helped push the East Bay up in minimum wage. And so Berkeley's now at 15, El Cerrito's now at 15, San Leandro's coming in close. Oakland's a little low, frankly. But what they're doing for July 1st and on beyond is for $15 to do a CPI increase. And that's the Consumer Price Index increase, which is around, I think, 3.5% for the East Bay. Ballparking it, but I don't think I'm too far off here. What I see for us is that we're at $15 an hour right now for small businesses, plan to go up to $16.30. And that is a really significant increase. I'm hearing in our small business community, that's a really big jump. That kind of statistical jump as a union organizer is not something we ever got, really, even from massive employers. That's a giant jump. And so I'm a little concerned about the impact of that on our small business community because it's a little out of line, frankly, with how we've been stepping this up to now. And I am open to a discussion of keeping a separation between small and large businesses to respect the fact that we have brought the labor standard up for the entire East Bay, but also that it's a priority for our council to invest in our local business community and keep small independent businesses here. And I'm interested to hear what my fellow council members think about that. Member Batters?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I want to begin my remarks by saying that I didn't hear a public comment or a staff presentation item that I did not agree with, because I don't think the comments that were made were mutually exclusive of one another. And I think that what the city of Emeryville has done on the minimum wage to the remarks that the mayor just made is exactly that. I think we've been a leader where the state was falling behind, where the region was falling behind, and we recognize, to the points that both Lenny and Ruth made, I think that solving the economic hardships of people in our community is not going to be done by picking one way of solving economic hardship. It's not going to be wages alone. It's not going to be housing alone. It's going to be a combination of policies that make it affordable for people, or at least more affordable for people to live and work here. And so I think that on the whole, that what this policy has done is really drive that conversation and help shorten the gap for a lot of families and working people who would be very hard hit in the absence of this policy. So I'm very supportive of this policy on the whole. But I agree with Ms. Boucher, and I want to thank you. We don't always agree. We do not always agree, for sure. I know that you and I have been back and forth on that many times. But I do want to agree with something you said, and I think it's really important to bring back to front and center, which is the purpose of this study is to conduct an evaluation and to provide a space for us to reflect. And that is exactly what we should be doing this evening, and I think that's where we're going right now. And so I spent a lot of time with this agenda item. And I've been talking to and listening to businesses in the community for the last couple years, and I felt that, and I want to thank Mills College for putting this report together. I felt this was a very instructive report, because what it did was it helped for me. It helped me with laser focused precision identify where we need to continue the conversation tonight and going forward. And it's not in the retail sector, and it's not in most of the groups that were polled. It's very explicitly limited to independent local food service. That is the place where we have to have a conversation. And so I did some analysis on this, and I just wanted to propose a couple things. One, the business model for food service is different. The business model for independent food service is different than franchise or fast food or quicker counter service food. And this isn't in a silo in our economy. Our local economy is, in 1.5 square miles, is extremely dynamic. We have 5 hotels here. Those hotels refer people to local establishments to go to have their dinner. When people are in town, they walk to the front counter. Where can I go have a nice dinner walking distance from my hotel? And sometimes people are like, where can I go get a beer? And they say the Broken Rack, or they say you can take the Emeryville over to Trader Vic's, or you can walk across the bridge and go to the townhouse. And these are places that, to Dave's point, are culturally significant to the community. And when you look at what the potential negative economic consequence of losing them is, it's actually got a multiplier effect, right? If you can't actually send people to a local restaurant, that hurts hotel sales. Hotel transient occupancy tax is the second highest source of revenue for the city of Emeryville. If Trader Vic's and the townhouse close, I can tell you BCDC is not going to re-permit something else at the site of Trader Vic's, nor is anyone going to take a 30,000 square foot sit-down restaurant establishment and repurpose it. If the townhouse closed, let's just be honest, it hasn't had to do anything with a conditional use permit in 50 years. It will not reopen as anything other than a condo building. And so when we talk about overall livability and the vitality of the economy, this is actually a super dynamic element to it. 24% of the city's retail is tied to sales tax. And when you talk about the public market and Bay Street and the food services that are there, those are critical to people showing up to shop. That is what sustains the bottom line of the city and what makes service delivery for the services we provide residents possible. So I struggled with this because I think this policy is a good policy. It is a socially just policy. It is a necessary policy. But one of the important things that policymakers have to do is they have to review their policies, and they have to do a critical self-analysis of, is this policy the best it could be? And I think that there are a lot of unanswered questions that we didn't survey people on. To do a comprehensive survey of all the details is difficult. And so I'd like to see a more refined survey of a more refined subset of this group that can really help us drill down, because we didn't see, to Mr. Donahue's point, we didn't see retailers saying, I have a problem with this, not in any number that's of significance to me. But what we did hear and see was local independent restaurants saying that this poses real challenges. And I agree with the statements that were made by the members of the public. And so in thinking about this, I think that I'm going to make an unpopular suggestion among some folks. I think that we need to hit pause for the very limited express purpose of the independent food service sector. I don't think we need to hit pause on anything else. I think we need to pull it aside before it goes up, and we need to do a more thorough investigation and discussion about what are the real impacts. And I think that some folks feel disinvested in the process. I feel some people felt that they didn't have a say in the process, or that this moved quickly. I don't agree with all the criticisms that have been made of it, but I think some of them merit a path towards repatriation with this community. And I think that one of the ways we can do that is in good faith to say it's worthwhile to hit pause right now. We are already ahead of everybody else. There's no harm being done to a worker who works in Emeryville in a local independent food service place in comparison to anyone else in the East Bay, and take the time to do that investigation and get the full details we need to understand what are those impacts and what do they mean for both businesses in Emeryville and the broader Emeryville economy. And so that's where I'm at now, and I don't know if there's support for that, but I think that that's a worthwhile investigation, because I think it's a statement of commitment to our economy and our community and our businesses and its employees all at one time. That's my comments, Ms. Mayor.
Member Martinez.
I'm supportive of this idea. I just want to make sure that we have a very clear definition of local independent food server that is clear to staff.
Can we parse that out?
I would propose that the rebate program that we have identifies who those small independent businesses are, and we could make it narrowly tailored to food service and not all other businesses. But maybe Chad has a different idea.
No, so the only place I know of that we have a pre-existing definition of what you described is in the rebate program. It was about a year ago, the council approved rebating the business license tax to independent retail and restaurants. We defined, for the purpose of that program, we defined independent as 12 or fewer, I believe, locations globally, and not associated with a franchise that also has more than 12 locations globally. So even if it were a small business that owns one, Subway franchise, that's not, they're not going to be caught up in this. That definition would need some work to be, it's fine for a rebate program, that kind of policy, but as a legal ordinance, we would need to
clean it up,
work on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that a motion?
What to do? What? I just gave my statements. I didn't make. I'm interested to hear what other people think. Those are my comments.
It's strictly an information item.
It's an action item.
You can ask a question.
My question is, when you mention hitting pause, where do you plan to hit pause? Where we are at 15 and 1569, or at?
I would like to hit pause before we make any other changes for this limited group. I don't want to hold back everything else, but this one small segment of the economy, which I think is very much unique in business model, scope, and its relevance to other revenue sources, I think that should be paused now.
At 15?
Yes, and I understand that to do that, that would essentially require the city council to amend the ordinance and pass it before July 1. So since there is no agenda item, action item, I would suggest that we have a special meeting to consider that and do that if we need to do that.
I support that. It's kind of weird for me as a labor organizer, but looking at this chart, I think we've gone up a maximum of $1 over the course of a year is the biggest jump the small business community has ever seen. This would be $1.30 in 6 months flat, jumping out pretty far in advance of everyone else who would be going up a maximum of off the cuff 50 cents for CPI. So I would support looking at that, but I'd really like to get more information about workers' opinions on this. And I think if possible, if we can anyway pattern some consumer behavior, that'd be really interesting to see, but I think that might be very difficult to accomplish. But definitely worker input. Member Donahue.
Well, this is for Mr. Gina. Do you foresee that we could define small independent restaurant business as a separate category and not get into trouble?
Well, yes. I mean, the council can adopt whatever definition it sees fit. So yes, I mean, given the direction from council, we can craft any potential ordinance amendment based on the direction and the outlines that you give us.
Okay, and then the parsing of what the definition is for the city to not get into liability problems, we would have to clearly define what we mean by that.
Yes, that's right. I mean, in order to have an ordinance that is enforceable, the definitions have to be clear from the city's regulatory standpoint in order to impose those regulations onto the affected community.
All right, I am supportive of this idea, and that we schedule a special meeting and we work on coming up with a definition for this kind of restaurant.
City manager.
Yes.
So the second reading would have to be at a regular meeting for it to be adopted. So I just want to so first of all, it would be helpful to know if the council, before I belabor this and bore even myself, is the council likely to request tonight that we bring something forward for your consideration that, if possible, could become effective before the July 1 or close to the July 1 date?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, given that...
May I ask a question? May I ask a question?
You can ask a question.
So could we have this at the May 21st and have a special meeting after it for the second reading, or does there have to be a number of days?
Walk us through.
Can I just walk you through a calendar?
Yeah,
that
that'd be
is
great.
maybe not possible, but maybe possible. So if you wanted this to be brought back for the May, are you listening? Okay. Catch me if I'm wrong. So if you want this to be brought back for the May 21st agenda for a first reading, we need to draft something and publish it by Friday. We can do our best to draft using the tax rebate program definitions, which I was just looking at. We may have to revise that, so we would publish our best effort by Friday, and then we may have to revise that with our friends in the city attorney's office help and republish the following Thursday. That would be then on your May 21st agenda. If you chose to adopt that first reading, then the second reading could be June 4th with an effective date of July 4th. So that's probably the closest. It has to be 30 days from the, is that 30 days?
30 days from the second reading.
From the second reading. So that's the closest we could get to the 1st of July with the second reading happening at a regular meeting.
Second reading couldn't happen at a special meeting?
That's correct. The second reading of an ordinance must take place at a regular meeting of the council. And so just to highlight, to make really clear, the calendar that the city manager just outlined with an effective date of an amendment on July 4th would mean that the ordinance as currently written would be in effect until that time. And so starting between that period of July 1 to July 3rd, the wage rates that are currently provided in the ordinance would apply.
So they'd have 3 days of a higher wage.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm listening to you, don't worry.
The original ordinance was delayed one day, July 2nd, not 1st, because of the same requirement. Use the microphone.
Yeah, I understand.
Never mind. We got
we understand.
The comment from the audience was that the original one was delayed one day to July 2nd. Okay. Member Batters.
Okay, I'm listening.
Does there a minimum number of days that have to exist between a first and second reading?
Yes,
How many?
5.
5?
5.
So if we call a special meeting for a first reading next week, and we meet the minimum Brown Act requirements for 5 days, no, we can't do that.
Next week?
Yeah.
No.
But then we get it in by May 21st for second reading at a regular meeting. You asked me what I thought. I'm giving you an option.
This is going to take some thinking, and I really would ask for us to have the opportunity to do that.
What if it was made simpler and it was the action item for the special meeting next week was simply to pause the whole thing and pass that on May 21st, and the whole thing is just delayed by, we just pass and say that it takes effect. All we do is change the date and change it to August 1st, and so then we have the extra time to do the amendment. So we don't have to worry about definitions and everything. It's a simple amendment to amend it to say the wage change takes effect August 1st, and then you have a whole month of time to discuss it if you'd like. And you don't have to do any drafting hula hoops.
We don't, but there are businesses who are already inquiring with us about the new rates for July 1st. And I know you've gotten a lot of calls about people implementing. They plan to implement on July 1st. So I would be.
I'm just trying to find a solution.
I want to be mindful of the impact on the other employers who are going to go up anyway. I don't know enough about how that operation works. Ms. Shabazz could maybe speak to that more about how they're implementing those changes. But a special meeting would still have a 24-hour call, right? And we still have to publish in advance.
So.
Member Pats, get a comment?
Yeah, I mean, that would be instead of trying to meet the deadline for Friday, or publishing this on the agenda, you could just call a special meeting prior to the 21st meeting, because the first reading can be at a special meeting, And that gives you time to actually publish something that you feel like you have your feet under. So that gives you till basically the 19th to get something written. But that still puts us into July before it would take effect. But that gets you around the publishing issue.
Can I ask a maybe dumb question of April? If you can come up to the mic to answer my maybe dumb question.
My wheels are turning now. Yes,
Great. All right. If the original one was delayed by 1 day, if we were to make a change that was offset by 3 days, how much of a problem? I mean, first of all, how many businesses are we talking about here that could be impacted by this? I'm assuming not a giant number.
40 restaurants or less.
40-ish. 40-ish. Okay. And is this possible for them to deal with in their payroll systems? I know literally nothing about payroll.
It probably would be a little bit of a nightmare for them with their payroll. So the reason that they call us almost 6 months in advance to find out what the wage rates will be is because they have to set up payroll systems. And remember, they also are setting up payroll systems for paid sick leave and also, well, not for independent restaurants, but the fair scheduling, fair work week. So it takes time for them to do that. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, at least 6 months before they start calling. And a lot of the calls actually are from attorneys that represent companies, so I have no idea of which ones they're calling on behalf of. And also the state publishes information on the wage rates. And so we have various people who are doing articles that call me that publish on the wage rates. So just, that piece would be a little bit difficult. I mean, we could deal with it in various ways, but it would impact some businesses as far as setting up payroll systems.
What about if we were to go ahead and, do this thing, but then put let it be a full month of payroll at the original 1630, and then the next month started at a fresh cycle at whatever we discuss and come up with? Would that be much easier from a payroll standard?
It may be a little easier. I suspect if you propose something like, that staggered, go up 16 and then 1630 for large businesses, might be a little easier because the businesses are used to going up that $1, and I think the expectation may have been that. That way you don't really...
6 days in between.
I think that
defeats what I'm trying to do, though,
Yeah,
which
we're
is
trying
to
to pause
stop
this.
this one group to do this study and not go ahead without studying this further.
Yeah.
I think we're trying to find a way to help a community that we know is being severely impacted while also not completely screwing with their operations. Fine line to walk.
Yeah, it will, because just from auditing records, I can see how payroll systems have to be set up in a way, and then to change it, it could cause a little bit of a problem. Not something we can work with, but I'm sure I would get calls about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Another thought would be to have a special meeting on May 28th.
Okay.
And that would be, that would give 6 days in between that date and June 4th. The second reading could then be on June 4th. That doesn't avoid the problem, obviously, of the effective date not being on July 1st. But that is a way to give us a little bit more time before the first reading.
Can I just walk backwards from May 21st? Because that's a general, regularly scheduled meeting. And if on the 21st we go backwards 5 days, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That means that has to be published by the 16th, correct? Minimum 5 days of Brown Act?
It's a
No, the 21st is a special meeting or a regular meeting?
So May 21st is a regular meeting. The minimum Brown Act requirements are 3 days prior to that regular meeting. So the agenda for the May 21st meeting at a minimum must be published by May 18th.
Okay.
Which is Saturday. So we would probably
Friday the
want to publish on
17th.
Friday the 17th.
And so if we had a meeting on the 17th, just hypothetically, or how many days between the first reading and the second reading does it have to be again?
5 calendar days.
So that's what I meant to say. I'm sorry. So that gets us back to the 16th, correct?
Okay.
Okay. And so how many days noticing a special meeting for it can we do? 5 days?
24 hours.
Are you trying to achieve a second reading on May 21st?
Yes.
Okay, so it's 5 days starting from the day after, so it's night 20, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the meeting would have to be on the 15th, which means
5 days is Friday. This Friday, going back 5 days from that, correct?
I mean, we're still publishing something on Friday.
I understand, but if you
You're trying to
published
have a
a
second
special
reading.
agenda for May 14th, let's say, or 15th, and you published it Thursday or Friday, you could accomplish having a special meeting for the limited purpose of this agenda item on the 14th or 15th, and you'd have your 5 days before the 21st. That is possible to do, and then we have no conflicts with July 1.
14th is safer.
Yeah, do it on the 14th.
17th.
You could do that, correct?
Um,
I mean,
numerically, yes. Will you get our best work and thinking? I can't promise that.
Well, the point of the meeting will be to do just this, and so it will be to work through that, and so you'll have to publish something, but you'll have the interim time to continue to work on it, hopefully, and we can then hash it out if we're just doing this one item. That would be my recommendation, Madam Mayor.
Okay. So to recapture it, the recommendation is to agendize for a pause for that special meeting to discuss a pause.
To consider the first reading of an ordinance that would amend the ordinance establishing the minimum wage for small businesses.
Independent serving food.
And we'd have to have the definition for the
That would be
posting
that would be what we're doing.
by this Friday?
That's what the request is that I'm hearing.
Okay. Question. I get probably not best work, but feasible?
Not impossible.
Feasible. Okay. We'll settle on that. All right. Was that a motion, John?
I don't know that it requires a motion. I think it's just staff direction. Is that correct?
So Planning Commission is meeting on the 14th.
On the 14th, right. Are you saying the 14th?
That's what he just said.
Oh.
Well, either at this point.
So
Well,
it'd have to be
14th would be better.
Just because I want to say this, I am not available on the 15th because I'm attending a fashion show. That's all true.
14th it is.
Promised a designer I will be attending.
The Planning Commission's already scheduled to meet here.
Planning
correct?
Commission meeting is at 6:30 PM. The council meeting could be scheduled at a earlier
It can be
time.
scheduled in another location because it's a special meeting.
That's true.
It could be scheduled at the ECCL.
Be
Not that
scheduled
I-
in the garden center.
Not that I want to do that, but these are all barriers that can be overcome.
2, 3, 4. If we do
It
it
could
on
also be done on the 15th, and you still have 5 days in between the first and second reading.
Well, I won't be available on the 15th.
Oh, so that doesn't work.
Probably the rest of the council can come there and take it on, but.
No, I'm not available on the
Oh, he's at a fashion show, so.
Yeah. No, attending,
Attending.
not in.
You could be in it too, probably.
or earlier in the day.
So
Remember, Pat.
one of my concerns is this is a large shift, and doing this basically with a week's notice, you know, it concerns me that we will not get all the people who would want to speak on this in the room. You know, we had a lot of passionate people come out and talk in favor of the minimum wage. While I was not on the council at the time, I sat here and waited my turn to hear from the community and from the workers, and to turn this around so quickly to me is a disservice to both the original spirit of the ordinance and to the community involvement. So
I would say that many members of the impacted sector of the community have actually given their input in the form of providing responses to this survey. And so while they may not have the ample time, and I appreciate that because I'm very interested in protecting the process, which is why I'm asking so many questions right now. I think that we've heard from them for a while about this, and this is such a narrow segment that we're looking at. It's not like we're inviting the IKEAs and the Targets and the gaps of the world to come in here and have that conversation with us. We're looking to, really what we're doing is we're not even saying that we won't go through with the minimum wage. We're simply saying we're going to hit pause and do some further evaluation of it. And it may be in the end that the right thing to do is to go forward. But I think that to protect what we're hearing them say, to protect against any additional consequences or harm, it doesn't make sense to move this forward when we know we should look at it. And then if we need to move forward with it after we've done that additional narrow evaluation, which can involve talking to the employees, can involve talking to a smaller, more detailed segment of the folks impacted by this ordinance, I mean, I think that that's a space where they can come and provide critical feedback at that time. But I think that we should do a detailed dive into it. And so pausing it doesn't require us to seek their feedback if we're only going so far as to do that. That's my thoughts.
Madam Mayor, we have another idea, thanks to our city clerk. Agendize the first reading for the 21st, and at that same meeting, have the council consider an action to add a regular meeting to its schedule for May 28th. And then you'd have a regular meeting at the end of the month, and the 30-day effective date would be before the beginning of July.
That's a great idea.
Can we make it the 29th?
Sure.
Is everyone free the 29th?
I'm in the East Coast at my nephew's wedding, so I cannot attend the 28th.
28th or the 29th?
Either one.
Can you make the 30th?
Nope, still be there. I come back
Can
first.
4 of us make that date? Can 4 of us make the 29th? I can.
I can.
Yes. Christian?
No
Yes.
fashion shows?
No fashion shows.
So, 29, Wednesday the 29th.
29th.
I think that is a more elegant solution.
So just one note. So when the ordinance is adopted, it has to be adopted by a majority of the total membership of the council.
Which means 4 of us or 3 of us?
Well, if you, for a 5-member council, right, then that means it needs 3 of you. If there are only 4 of you that are present, then
You need 3?
you need 3.
Okay.
So
You still need 3.
you still need 3, yeah.
Yeah.
We understand.
Okay, do we have a consensus that we want to do it on that time frame?
So, yeah, not a motion, or does it require a motion or no?
You have a majority.
We would prefer to have a motion asking us to bring an item to the May 21st meeting, and then to also bring an item to schedule a regular meeting on May 29th.
I will make a motion to bring to the May 21st meeting an item to consider an ordinance with the prior discussion. I won't go into all of it. Consider an ordinance for the purposes of putting a freeze in place before July 1st for the limited scope of small independent food services under the minimum wage ordinance, and to at the same time on May 21st schedule for a council vote the creation of a third regular council meeting, general council meeting, to be heard on Wednesday the 29th at the city council chambers at a time in the evening consistent with the regular schedule. That's my motion.
We get a motion from Member Bowders, a second from Member Martinez.
Councilmember Bowders?
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue?
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pats?
No.
And Mayor Medina?
Aye. Okay.
I just want to thank everybody who stayed and came out to share their point of view. It's especially difficult topic to talk about, and I want to thank my colleagues for engaging it, and I think that everybody up here has all the right motivations regardless of how they vote, and so I want to thank all of them for their commitment to Emeryville's workers and businesses.
Okay, department head reports.
That would be me. Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, this is my monthly report to you on the most recent Planning Commission meeting, which was held on Thursday, April 25th. I would note that Commissioner Christine Scott Thompson was absent from that meeting, so we had a quorum of 6 commissioners present. The first item that they considered was the reconsideration of the Marketplace Redevelopment Project Parcel B. As I'm sure the council recalls, that item, their January 24th approval of that was appealed to you, and you then remanded it back to the commission. The commission held the hearing on reconsideration pursuant to your direction, and they continued that to a continued regular meeting on May 14th. They did that because Wareham Development submitted a fair amount of additional information about 1 hour before the meeting, and the commission did not have time to fully digest that information before making their decision. So again, they continued it to a continued regular meeting on May 14th. There was also an item to approve a conditional use permit and design review for a duplex conversion on 55th Street, and that was approved unanimously, 6-0. That is appealable to the City Council, and the appeal deadline is this coming Friday, May 10th. If the council wishes to appeal that decision to yourselves, obviously, this would be the time to do that. And finally, the commission reviewed the capital improvement program, as Mr. Clow indicated in his presentation, and unanimously found that it was consistent with the general plan. So that concludes my report on the April 25th meeting. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to respond to them. If not, I have another item as well.
Questions? New item.
New item, Bike to Work Day is Thursday, May 9th. Yes, and we are having a community ride from City Hall starting at 8 o'clock in the morning out here on the front steps. It will not be a century or anything of the sort. It will be whatever you call a 1 mile ride. It'll be, yeah, it'll be the world's shortest century, in keeping with our world's shortest triathlon. So we'll just be riding to the Energizer station up on Adeline Street, and we'll basically be hitting all the Energizer stations in Emeryville. We'll loop around, come back to City Hall, and then for those who want to continue to the other Energizer stations, we will do that. So we would certainly hope to see at least a few council members on our ride, if not all of you.
Where will you be at 8:35 a.m.? Like
after
children are dropped off?
In front of your house. Probably around, well, I don't know how fast we're going to go. We could be hanging out at the Energizer station on Adeline.
On Adeline, I'll meet you there.
Okay. We'll wait for you.
Where is the Energizer station on Adeline this year?
It's at, well, always in the past, it's been at 46th Street, I believe.
Okay. Perfect.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's what's on the map.
Yeah. It's between Bakery Lofts and View 46 on the east side of Adeline. Well, sometimes they're on both sides, actually. So that concludes my report.
Thank you. All right, any other department head reports? Nope. Nope. Okay, future agenda item requests. Member Bowders.
Going on the May 21st item, very simple item, hopefully. AC Transit passed a resolution in response to the Caltrans item that called for Caltrans to install a bus-only lane between Powell Street and the Bay Bridge, and they're asking the cities in the North County if we would just provide a letter of support for that request. And so they asked if we would agenda it, so I'm just wondering if we can just have it as a consent item, perhaps.
Could we do that on the June 4th meeting? I'd like to talk to you about some of my thoughts
Sure.
about how to frame that up.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm okay with that. Is that okay with everyone else?
Yeah. June 4th, fine. Any other agenda item requests? Cool. Seeing none, I think we've got an adjourn in memoriam. Christian, I'll hand it over.
Thank you. So, switching gears here. Eleanor Letchew passed away on April 28, 2019. She was the director of the Emeryville Center for Child Development, ECDC, for 27 years, having been hired in 1979 at the center's inception and working there until her retirement in 2005. To achieve the vision of the city's redevelopment agency to provide quality, affordable childcare in Emeryville, Ms. Letchow opened the doors at the center in just 3 weeks, having obtained a State Department of Education funding to do so. The permanent location of the center was not completed until 1991, and in the intervening years, Ms. Lechow oversaw the program's temporary locations at 7 different spaces, all while providing safe, warm, loving, stimulating, and supportive care to the children. During her tenure, Ms. Lechow served over 3,500 children and their families. She was honored by the council in January of 2006 for her service, and we would like to adjourn this meeting in her memory.
Thank you. So adjourned.
Thank you, Member Pats.